The day dawned over King's Landing with a hush more profound than any morning in living memory. Low clouds clung to the rooftops, pale shapes drifting across the city's sprawl until they settled in the alleys like ghosts. The harbor was eerily calm, the sun's glimmer flattened by the dull, shapeless sky. Fishermen stooped over half-empty nets, muttering that a storm brewed, but the wind stayed curiously silent. Inside the Red Keep, a disquiet had spread among the servants and guards alike. They scurried through narrow passages with guarded eyes, uncertain of what had shifted in the world overnight, yet perceiving some intangible threat that pressed against the city walls. No ravens had flown in from Bravos, nor from Old Town or Dorne, yet all seemed to know, on the edge of consciousness, that the realm stood at a subtle but dire turning point. Within the great hall, the Iron Throne loomed as ever, a mass of twisted swords and bitter steel. On it sat King Daeron Targaryen, the young monarch who had inherited a fractious realm after the passing of his father. He was no fool, but no hardened warrior either. His hair was silver gold, the hallmark of his lineage, and his gray eyes moved restlessly over those who knelt before him or attended in watchful silence. Beside him stood his Kingsguard, glittering white cloaks draped over steel plate. At his right hand was his new hand of the king, Lord Roderick Celtigar, known for his sharp wit and sharper ambition. Daeron listened with a pretense of calm, but the sense of something dark brewing in the corners of the realm was all too palpable to him. He was only 22, and though none doubted his good heart, many whispered that kindness alone would not keep the throne secure. If there were new threats gliding toward King's Landing, Daeron would have to rely on others more ruthless to face them. Beneath the shadow of a tall column, half hidden in the gloom, stood a figure who watched the proceedings with keen eyes. Her name was Serena Waters, though she rarely used her surname and never boasted of her parentage. In truth, few knew the details of her birth. She was rumored to be the natural daughter of a Stormlands nobleman. She was no lady of a high house, but had come to the capital as a court functionary and proven herself far too competent to be trifled with. Through 3 reigns she had survived, flitting from position to position in the Red Keep, gathering secrets as easily as a bee gathers pollen. Once an attendant to a royal cousin, once a scribe, once a companion to a princess, she now served as the Master of Whisperers, a role she had neither expected nor wanted, yet one that came to her as naturally as breathing. It was said she had the ears of every urchin in Flea Bottom and half the innkeepers of the Crownlands. Even the gold cloaks who patrolled the city gave her secret nods when they saw her pass. Serena sensed the tension in the throne room. She could read the king's wariness in the set of his jaw, the scuffing of his foot where it rested on the Iron Throne's dais. Lord Celtigar's eyes were upon the lords who petitioned, but his mind, she suspected, was on more pressing matters. Perhaps he too felt what she did, the creeping fear that the uneasy peace King Daeron had preserved was about to break, not because of any open rebellion from the great houses, but something older and darker. When rumors began to swirl that faceless men had been spotted near the narrow sea, men and women who bore no name and traded in the currency of death, Serena's sources had whispered the unthinkable. A plague of assassins was weaving its path toward the Iron Throne. When the last petitioner of the morning concluded his plea, the king made a gesture to his Kingsguard, and the assembled lords stepped back, bowing. Court was dismissed, and Daeron rose from the throne, looking relieved to be away from the public eye. Lord Celtigar followed him, with several sworn knights and functionaries in tow. Serena peeled away from the shadows and slipped after them, her leather boots making hardly a sound on the polished floor. She moved with a fox-like grace, accustomed to going unnoticed. In the outer hall, the king waved away most attendants, leaving only a select few: Serena, Lord Celtigar, the Lord Commander of the King's Guard, and Maester Harold, an aged but sharp-eyed healer who also served as the king's chief advisor on matters arcane and philosophical. They assembled in the King's Solar, a cramped but well-appointed room with high windows that overlooked the Blackwater Rush. There were enough chairs for the king and a handful of advisors. Daeron sank into his seat and rubbed at the bridge of his nose. Serena remained standing beside a tapestry that depicted Aegon's conquest in vibrant thread. The day's heat was stifling, though the air had grown oppressive with the uncertain pall of gloom that lingered in every corridor. Lord Celtigar spoke first, pressing fingertips together. Your Grace, he said in a voice that was quietly urgent, we have discussed at length the word from Bravos that certain disquiet has taken root in the city. Bankers murdered in daylight, a member of the Sea Lord's household found with his throat slit in a locked room, the brazen attempt on a Pentoshi merchant rumored to have ties to the crown. All of these murders have a single hallmark. Not a single guard spotted the killers, no ransom note was demanded, no blood money left behind to signal a typical cell's word job. The only sign, if one can call it that, was a single coin left at the scene of each murder, an iron coin with the hooded visage. The coin of the Faceless Men. Maester Harold's voice rasped against the stone walls. I have studied the texts that remain from Old Town. They speak of the origins of this order of assassins deep in the mines of Valyria and the secret magics they practice in the House of Black and White. They are not an army in the sense of thousands of men at arms. They fight wars of subterfuge. It is not swords and spears but daggers in the night, poison in your cup, a name whispered to the many-faced god. If the rumors of their open hostility are true, it suggests they have taken a contract so colossal or so driven by fanaticism that they are prepared to bring down an entire dynasty. The king's eyes turned to Serena. Our master of whisperers is perhaps the only one who might confirm this. What news do you have of the House of Black and White? Serena took a step forward. Her voice was calm but carried a gravity that demanded attention. Nothing good, Your Grace. My eyes and Bravos vanished 2 weeks past. The last message that reached me was that the high priests of the many-faced god had grown restless. There is talk of a holy mission, a vague phrase, but chilling nonetheless. If, indeed, they have singled out the Iron Throne as their target, it might mean they believe the Targaryen line must pay a debt of death owed to their god. Or someone with deep coffers and deeper hatred has commissioned the greatest cull in living memory. My guess is that the Iron Bank itself might be involved. King's Landing's debts to Bravos are heavy. If the crown were to default, or if it were rumored to be on the cusp of chaos, the Iron Bank may have decided to accelerate that chaos. The Faceless Men, for the right price, could expedite any plan that leads to a power shift in Westeros. The king's fingers tightened on the arm of his chair. Then I fear we may be at war already against foes we cannot see. But how does one wage war against shadows? No one spoke for a moment. Then the Lord Commander of the King's Guard, Ser Balduin Graves, a tall man with silvering hair and a proud, unlined face, cleared his throat. We protect you, Your Grace, night and day. Every meal tasted, every corridor guarded, every window locked. We can keep you safe of that, I have no doubt. But to defeat them? That is a greater question. The Faceless Men do not meet in open battle. They strike in the dark and vanish. Darren's gaze dropped to the table. Then he looked to Serena with a hint of desperation. There must be someone who can unravel their plots before they strike. Serena nodded slowly. In Bravos, there is rumored to be one warrior who parted ways with the Faceless Men after learning their secrets. A man known only as Norik. It was said he refused to take a contract that required the murder of children, and in turn, he was hunted by his own. He fled Bravos for Westeros many years ago. There are whispers he is alive, hidden in the Stormlands. If we find him, he may well possess the knowledge we need to stand against the House of Black and White. Lord Celtigar's lips tightened at the mention of a possible traitor among the Faceless Men. Such a man would be a formidable ally indeed, provided he's not working his own angle. But to place our trust in one rumored outcast, that is a risk. Still, perhaps it is our only chance. King Daeron sat straighter, as if the idea stirred a measure of hope in him. Then we must find this Norik. Raise no banners, make no open call. Send someone with discretion. Serena bowed. I will go, Your Grace. Quietly. I have my own network and I've traveled enough roads unseen to keep the search secret. If the Faceless Men's suspect were seeking one of their own, they'll try to kill him before he can help us. A flicker of gratitude crossed Darren's face. Then do so, but take men you trust. She nodded. I will. And while I am gone, you must guard yourself well. Expect them to strike at the heart of the realm. The king's life, the royal line, these will be their principal targets. But if their ambition is truly to bring the Iron Throne to its knees, you can expect that no High Lord or Lady is safe. A hush followed her words. Outside, somewhere beyond the thick walls of the Red Keep, thunder rumbled faintly as if the sky itself felt the gathering tension. The king stood and placed a hand on Serena's shoulder. His touch was surprisingly warm. Be swift. And be safe. She inclined her head. I will return with what I learn. Then she stepped back and slipped out of the solar, the shape of her cloak melting into the dim corridor beyond. That very evening, Serena departed King's Landing quietly, accompanied by a small retinue of 3 skilled companions, none wearing the crown's colors, each sworn to secrecy. They were Talus, a Bravosi cell's word with a penchant for silent infiltration; Myrn, a former Septon who had long since left the faith but retained a devout man's clarity of purpose; and Sarah, a scout from the Riverlands with a bow always slung across her shoulders, known for her uncanny marksmanship. They rode under the cover of darkness, slipping out of the mud gate among a caravan of merchants. No fanfare, no display of wealth. Their destination, the Stormlands, on a hunch and a rumor that this man called Norik might be found somewhere near Rain House or perhaps among the foothills that overlooked Shipbreaker Bay. As the night swallowed them, King's Landing receded behind its high walls and the Red Keep's ramparts faded into the gloom. Serena felt the weight of the task upon her. She had faced conspirators and rebels before, but never a threat so elusive as a legion of assassins. She recalled the stories she had gleaned from old Bravosi texts about the House of Black and White, how their acolytes learned to wear faces not their own, how they spoke the language of the many-faced god in the quiet gloom of their temple. How for the right price, a king or queen might be undone as easily as the lowliest beggar. Though her face remained impassive, Serena's heart beat faster, fueled by equal parts dread and determination. For several days they traveled, skirting the King's Road when they could, taking lesser-known paths through farmland and forest to avoid prying eyes. The Stormlands were prone to sudden downpours and the group found themselves drenched by fierce rains more than once. Each time, Talus would curse in Bravosi under his breath, complaining that the climate here was as savage as an angry titan. Myrn would smile and mutter some half-remembered prayer. Serena would say nothing at all, simply guiding her horse onward, always watchful for shadows that might conceal an assassin's blade. She knew that if the Faceless men were truly mobilizing against the Iron Throne, they might have ears everywhere. On the 5th day of their journey, they reached the outskirts of a small fishing village perched on the rocky coast north of Rain House. The sea churned gray and restless against the jagged shores. Serena led her companions to an unremarkable inn that smelled of fish stew and stale ale. She entered first, her hood drawn low, and found a corner table. Old fisherfolk dominated the other tables, talking quietly over cups of watered wine. The innkeeper, a portly man with thinning hair, welcomed them with a curt nod, though his eyes lingered on their cloaks and the worn boots that marked them as travelers of some means. They took rooms for the night, and Serena soon set about her usual inquiries. While Talus distracted a half-drunk fisherman with stories of bravos, Serena leaned in to speak with the innkeeper's wife, a woman with a lined face and cautious eyes. A few coins in the right hand, a few gentle words, and Serena soon gathered that a stranger matching the rough description of Norik had indeed passed through the village some weeks ago. He had scarcely spoken, but the villagers had noticed the haunted look in his eyes, the scar on his cheek, and the way his hand hovered near a hidden dagger at all times. He had departed up the coastal road. Some whispered he made for a cave by the cliffs, others that he was seen near a rocky pass that led inland. No one knew his name, but they called him the Ghost of the Stormlands, half warning, half legend. Serena thanked the innkeeper's wife and returned to her companions. "We're close," she said softly, "but we must tread carefully. If Norik is half the man they say, he'll not welcome strangers with open arms." They spent a restless night in that cramped inn, the wind howling outside and rain rattling the shutters. Every creak of the floorboards made Serena's eyes snap open, half expecting a faceless killer to slip through the darkness. None came, but her dreams were troubled, shadows in the shape of men, knives in the dark, the hiss of voices chanting a twisted prayer to the many-faced god. Come morning, they set out along the coastal cliffs, spindly black trees swaying under a bruised sky. The wind stung their faces with salty mist. Serena signaled them to proceed in silence, each listening for the slightest sound beyond the crash of waves. Hours passed. As they crested a hill, the path narrowed, hemmed in by jagged rocks and a steep drop to the sea. Sarah, the scout, raised a hand, pointing to the outline of a small figure perched on a rock, staring at the turbulent waters below. They approached cautiously. The figure did not move until they were nearly upon him. Then he stood with the fluid grace of a predator. He was of average height, cloaked in dark fabric that whipped around his lean form. When he turned, Serena saw the faint scar along his cheek, a silvered line that vanished under the edge of his jaw. His eyes were the color of the sea in a storm, cold and intense. "You've come far," he said in a low voice. His accent was Bravosi, though tempered by years in Westeros. "Why?" Serena dismounted. lifting her hands to show she carried no drawn weapon. "I seek Norik, the man who left the House of Black and White. If you are he, then I have a proposal." He tilted his head. "The Faceless men and I parted ways a lifetime ago. You have no business with me." Talus, who had stepped forward with an eager expression, drew breath to speak, but Serena signaled him to hold his tongue. She took another step toward the stranger. "They have declared war on the Iron Throne, or so we believe. The king is young and holds a fragile realm together. If the Faceless men succeed, thousands will die in the chaos that follows. We need your help to stop them." The man's lips tightened. He said nothing, but his stance shifted, the fingers of his left hand curling slightly as if longing to reach for a blade. Serena pressed on. "You refused them once because the contract demanded a child's life. That suggests you retain a conscience, rare in an organization that worships death as a form of mercy. That conscience is why I believe you can be persuaded to help." For a time, only the wind spoke, whistling through the rocky crags. Finally, he exhaled. "You do not know what you are asking. The Faceless men do not wage war in the way you imagine. They will strike your king, your lords, your knights. They will poison city wells, sow rumors to turn your own people against you, and disappear into the night, wearing the faces of your friends. You will trust no one, and if I aid you, they will hunt me as a betrayer. They will not rest until my body feeds the crows." Serena inclined her head. "Then help us win, so that they are too scattered and broken to pursue you." He let out a sharp laugh, mirthless. "Win? There is no such thing as victory over death." Myrn, who had been silent this whole time, stepped forward and spoke with quiet conviction. "If all men live in the shadow of death, we choose whether to accept it passively or fight against it until our last breath. Perhaps there is no final victory against the inevitability of the grave, but we can save who we can. That matters." Norik regarded Myrn with a strange look as though searching for deception. Then he nodded once. "I left the House of Black and White to keep my soul, small though it may be. It seems fate has brought me face to face with their designs once more." He sighed. "Very well. I will show you how to fight them. But know that this war you speak of will come at a greater cost than you can imagine." Serena did not allow herself to feel relieved, though her heart lightened fractionally. "We can discuss the details elsewhere. This place is too exposed." Norik agreed, and so they made their way inland to a cave tucked behind a forest of stunted pines. There, with a makeshift hearth, they dried themselves and shared simple rations of bread and salt fish. In the crackling firelight, Norik began to speak of the secrets of the Faceless men. He told them of the House of Black and White, a place of silent worship and shifting identities where novices were taught to relinquish their sense of self. They learned the arts of poison, disguise, infiltration, and the subtle manipulations of men's hearts. A contract taken was a sacred vow to the many-faced god. Payment was placed at the temple and the assassins dispatched to fulfill the death promised. But why would they turn their entire order against the Iron Throne? Talus asked, his voice low. "It seems too large, too open. Usually they prefer single kills." "They are not an army, but they do not need to be," Norik said. "If the House of Black and White has decreed that the Targaryen dynasty must end, it is because a contract of immense significance was placed or because they believe the Targaryens' existence offends their god's design. It may be both. There may be a confluence of powerful patrons. The Iron Bank, yes, or other enemies of House Targaryen. Perhaps even a lord in Westeros who has mustered enough gold to purchase the greatest cull in living memory." Serena leaned forward, her brow furrowed. "Then the question is, how do we stop them? We have guards, but any guard can be replaced by one of their own wearing his face. Poisons can be slipped through the tightest defenses. Even if we protect the king, the realm will still be destabilized by the assassinations of lords and ladies that hold the crown together." Norik's expression was grim. "The only chance is to expose them. Make the realm aware of the danger. Force them into the open. The Faceless men thrive on anonymity. But if lords and ladies know of the threat, if ravens fly to every corner announcing that the House of Black and White is waging war upon the realm, the advantage of secrecy diminishes. People will guard themselves better. And the assassins might be forced to take riskier measures, leaving them vulnerable to being discovered and cut down." Sarah frowned. "But wouldn't that spread panic?" Norik nodded. "Yes, and panic is dangerous. but it may be the lesser evil compared to silent devastation. Serena clasped her hands. We'll need more than that. We'll need a means of identifying them. If a faceless man can wear another's face perfectly, how do we reveal the fraud? At this question, Norik hesitated. There are subtle signs that betray one who wears a face not their own for too long. The eyes sometimes grow red and irritated. If they must slip from one face to another rapidly, they will need special ointments and solutions that smell faintly of certain rare herbs. If you can detect that odor, you might suspect an imposter. Also, certain lines of the original face are not fully erased after extended usage. It is not easy to detect, but it can be done by a trained eye. Myrn swallowed, looking uneasy. This is a slim advantage. It is better than none, Serena said softly. Then she fixed Norik with a steady gaze. Return with us to King's Landing. Help us advise the king and his council. Show us how to root out these assassins. In return, we will protect you and grant you amnesty for any crimes you may have committed in the past. A mirthless smile touched Norik's lips. Crimes? My life has been one long offense against the order I once served. But I will come. I have nowhere else to go, and this cause is as just as any I have yet encountered. They agreed to leave at dawn, but as the night wore on, a storm broke over the hills, lightning flickering across the sky. The group huddled deeper into the cave. Serena slept in fits and starts, always drifting into uneasy dreams of faceless figures. Once she thought she glimpsed movement near the cave entrance, a flicker of shadow in the flash of lightning. She bolted upright, hand on her dagger, but found only the shifting shapes of wind-blown trees. Still, her instincts whispered that they were not alone. She made a mental note to post a double watch. Come morning, the storm's wrath had abated, leaving the world drenched and shimmering in pale daylight. The travelers readied their horses and quietly departed the cave. Their journey back to King's Landing would take several days, if not a week, but Serena was determined to press on with minimal delays. She felt every hour might bring new murders in the capital. The faceless men were as unstoppable as the tide once they set their purpose. On the second day of the return journey, as they wound through a wooded glen, Sarah dropped back from the lead, her eyes keen. She had spotted footprints in the muddy path that did not match their own. The group dismounted and investigated. Talus crouched low, examining the tracks. Light tread, possibly 2 or 3 individuals, traveling parallel to us, about a quarter-mile off the main path. Norik's face darkened. Faceless men or simple bandits? If they know how to hide footprints, it's likely the former. We should assume we're being followed. Serena nodded, her stomach twisting with tension. Let's lay a trap. We can't outrun them if they plan to harry us all the way to King's Landing. They devised a plan to bait the Watchers into a vulnerable position. Serena and Myrn rode onward, leading the horses, while Talus, Sarah, and Norik split off and circled back. The idea was to catch the pursuers by surprise. It was a precarious gamble. Every minute Serena expected to hear the hiss of an arrow or the crunch of a footstep too close behind. Suddenly, a figure burst from the undergrowth, lunging at Serena's horse. The attacker wore plain leathers but moved with uncanny silence. Serena reacted in a flash, drawing her dagger as the figure's blade slashed upward at her saddle. She twisted, avoiding a fatal strike, but felt the hot sting of steel biting into her thigh. Her horse reared. She tumbled to the ground with a heavy thud, rolling away just in time to avoid another slash. Myrn cried out, fumbling for a sword he barely knew how to wield. But before the attacker could turn on him, Talus and Sarah emerged from the trees, steel flashing. The attacker pivoted inhumanly fast to parry Talus's rapier, while Sarah knocked an arrow and loosed. The arrow grazed the attacker's shoulder, drawing a sharp gasp. Still, the foe did not fall. Quick as a striking viper, the figure hurled a dagger at Sarah. It would have found her heart if she had not dived behind a fallen log at the last instant. Norik appeared behind the attacker, brandishing a short sword with the stance of a trained Bravosi duelist. Their blades met in a flurry of clashes, steel shrieking. The attacker fought with fluid skill, but Norik anticipated each move, forcing them off balance. In a final swift motion, Norik disarmed the assassin, sending the blade spinning away. Talus moved in, pressing his rapier to the attacker's throat. A moment of tense silence followed, broken only by Serena's sharp intake of breath, as she pressed a hand to her wounded thigh. The attacker stared with cold, dark eyes, a smear of blood on their shoulder from Sarah's arrow. Then the face seemed to shift, the features flickering like a reflection in rippling water. Before their eyes, the attacker's face transformed into the blank visage of a young woman, hair color changing, nose shrinking, cheeks morphing. It was an unsettling sight, as though the flesh itself were pliable clay. Sarah gasped, "Gods!" Norik's jaw tightened. A faceless man or woman, whichever. They must have been tracking us since the Stormlands. Talus pressed the rapier a fraction closer. "What's your purpose? Why come for us?" The assassin's lips twisted in a mocking smile. A slow, wet sound gurgled in her throat, and her eyes burned with hatred. "You cannot outrun the many-faced god," she whispered, each word spoken with malice. "All men must serve." Then, in a motion too fast to stop, she jerked her head forward, impaling her own neck on Talus's blade. Blood spilled from her mouth. She choked, body going limp. Talus yanked back, wide-eyed and shaken, but it was too late. The assassin collapsed to the muddy ground, dead before they could attempt any interrogation. Myrn quickly knelt beside Serena, checking her leg wound. It was bleeding freely, and she was pale but alive. He pressed a cloth to the cut. Norik stared at the dead faceless man, chest heaving. Sarah stood guard, arrow at the ready, scanning the trees for any sign of a second attacker. Serena grimaced through the pain. No more footsteps. Perhaps it was only one. Norik knelt to examine the body, gently prying open the assassin's cloak to see if there were any clues. He found a pouch of strange-smelling herbs, a single coin stamped with the hooded visage, and a small glass vial with a residue of dark liquid inside. He showed them to Serena. "Poison. These are typical tools of the House of Black and White. This one was no novice either. Look at the skill with which she fought." He sighed. "We've been fortunate to survive." Talus wiped sweat from his brow. "A luck that might not hold if more come after us." Serena gathered herself, pushing through the pain. "We ride then. We cannot linger. Once in the capital, we'll have more resources." With the help of Myrn's basic healing knowledge and some bandages from Sarah's pack, they managed to bind Serena's wound enough for her to sit astride her horse. The group pressed on at a faster pace, every sense alert to further pursuit. Yet no additional assassins appeared. It seemed the House of Black and White had assumed a single disciple would suffice. They reached King's Landing as dusk fell on the 7th day since their departure from the Stormlands. The city rose before them, sprawling and chaotic, the stench of refuse and the sounds of haggling merchants washing over them. The Mudgate guards let them pass without fanfare, none the wiser to the gravity of their arrival. Once inside, they wove through the crowded streets, heading for the Red Keep. Serena's leg throbbed with each movement of her horse, but she gritted her teeth and pushed forward. Norik rode beside her, hood drawn low, scanning every face they passed for potential threats. Within the Red Keep's outer ward, they were greeted by a contingent of gold cloaks who recognized Serena. Once word spread that the Master of Whisperers was injured, a stir of concern rippled through the garrison. They hurried inside, stable hands taking the horses as Serena's party dismounted. A pair of guards helped her along. By the time they reached the king's private audience chamber, Daron himself was waiting, his face drawn with worry. Lord Celtigar and Ser Balduin Graves stood at his side, flanked by 2 Kingsguard knights. Maester Harold bustled forward, beckoning for a seat so he could tend to Serena's wound properly. Daron's gaze swept over Norik and the others. "You've returned, but not unscathed." Serena sank onto a cushion, exhaling sharply as Maester Harold began to unwrap the makeshift bandage. "We found him," she said, nodding to Norik. "And the faceless men found us. They are indeed on the move." Norik stepped forward, bowing his head respectfully, though not exactly submissively. "Your Grace, I am called Norik. I once served the House of Black and White, but no more. I have come to warn you that your enemies are legion and your time short. The assassins have already struck beyond Bravos. I fear they will attempt to dismantle the realm." Lord Celtigar's nostrils flared. "Can we be sure you're not a double agent?" Norik met his gaze without flinching. "You may never be certain, but if I wished to harm the king, I would need only have bided my time, let your Master of Whisperers bleed out in the forest. Instead, I have come to help." Daron inclined his head, though wariness flickered in his eyes. "Help us how?" Taking a steadying breath, Norik began. "Announce to every corner of the realm that the Faceless Men have declared a covert war on House Targaryen and all who support it. Let the lords tremble, let them shore up defenses, let them question their servants' faces. Also, gather a circle of watchers, men and women trained to look for the signs of an assassin in disguise. You must also secure your own houses, your kitchens, your wells. Any infiltration must be anticipated. Also, you must discover the identity of whoever has paid for this war, if indeed it was paid for. If it is merely a religious decree from the House of Black and White, it will be unstoppable. But if there is a patron, we may root out the source. Maester Harold, who had finished cleansing Serena's wound and was applying a pungent salve, looked up. And how do we do that? Information, Norik said. We have the coin from the dead assassin. You, Master Maester, might examine its composition. Sometimes the minting offers clues who paid for the coins or if they were minted specifically for a contract. The Bravosi style remains fairly consistent, but there are subtleties. Also, there may be hidden sigils or stamps if the coin is from a particular sponsor. Lord Celtigar crossed his arms. We are to rely on guesswork about a coin? Serena, wincing at the salve's sting, interjected, it is better than nothing. My spies have told me that the Iron Bank itself might be pulling strings, but we can't discount that a Westerosi lord might have financed this. We have old grudges aplenty. The king rubbed his temples. In the meantime, what do we do? Post more guards? My lords will demand a show of strength, but as we've said, 1,000 men cannot stop a single faceless man from slipping a single drop of poison into a single cup. Ser Balduin Graves bowed. We must still try, your grace. For your protection, I will set a constant watch of the King Guard. No one sees you without being thoroughly vetted. Daron nodded. Do so, and we spread the word throughout the realm. Though it may cause alarm, at least it might save lives. Norik regarded the king for a moment. There is one more precaution. If the war is truly declared, they will seek to remove you swiftly. You are the embodiment of House Targaryen's rule. You should consider feigning your own death or departure from the capital so that they are forced to hunt a phantom. A shocked silence followed. The king looked uneasy, but Lord Celtigar let out a soft exclamation. Pretend the king has died? That would cause chaos. Not if carefully managed, Norik said. A rumor of illness, a quiet funeral with a closed casket while you remain hidden in the castle's depths or whisked away to Dragonstone. The faceless men cannot kill a ghost. And while they scramble, you can coordinate your defenses in secret. Daron glanced at Serena, who was as startled as any. The plan had merit, but it carried great risks. We will consider it, the king said quietly. For now, let us proceed with vigilance. We will meet tomorrow with the council to decide our course. He dismissed them, though he called for Norik to remain a moment longer, presumably to question him further. As Serena was helped away by Maester Harold and Talus, she felt a swirl of relief and dread in equal measure. They had returned, but the struggle was only just beginning. That night, though the king insisted she rest, Serena's mind whirled with 1,000 tasks that needed doing. She wrote coded letters to her agents in the city and beyond, instructing them to spread quiet word of the threat. She arranged for watchers in each wing of the Red Keep, carefully screened for loyalty, though in truth, loyalty could be feigned if one was wearing another's face. Her wound ached and exhaustion weighed on her eyelids, but she kept pushing. She had to. The next few days would be critical. During the council meeting the following morning, tensions ran high. Lords and ladies shouted in alarm at the news that the legendary assassins had declared war on the realm. Some accused each other of conspiracy. Others advocated immediate retaliation by sending ships to blockade Bravos. Norik cautioned that such open aggression would not deter the faceless men, only anger the free city further. Daron tried to maintain order, his voice calm but laced with strain. Serena, seated with her bandaged leg elevated, contributed where she could, offering leads, proposed measures, but each solution seemed insufficient. Lord Celtigar proposed a cunning idea, employing other assassins or cells words to track and kill any rumored faceless men. Let blood hunt blood, he said. But Norik shook his head. There are none who match their skill. You might kill one or two if you're incredibly lucky. But the House of Black and White is a labyrinth of shadows. You'd never root them all out with brute force. And the moment you tried, they would respond with unimaginable ferocity. In the end, the council settled on a multi-pronged strategy to alert the realm, to strengthen internal security, to attempt to discover the patron behind the assassins, and to consider a ruse involving the king's supposed illness. Time would tell if it would be enough. And so began a strange new chapter in the life of King's Landing. Word spread swiftly through the Crownlands, then to the rest of Westeros, that a dreaded order of Bravosi killers had set their sights on the Iron Throne. Reactions varied widely. Some lords laughed it off as a rumor or declared they were too powerful to fear such Bravosi shadows. Others panicked, doubling their guard, suspecting every servant. Whispers ran wild in taverns, markets, and feasting halls. Some rumored that the Targaryens had offended the many-faced god by dabbling in forbidden magic. Others claimed that House Lannister or House Baratheon had paid for the assassins to retake the throne for themselves. Fear bred suspicion, and suspicion bred fractures. In King's Landing itself, the changes were immediate. Guards at the Red Keep were tripled. Ser Balduin Graves ordered random inspections of staff, ensuring each was who they claimed to be. Maester Harold concocted a simple test involving a pungent herb solution. Anyone who refused to drink it might be suspected of having hidden poison on their person. Many grumbled at the inconvenience, but few refused outright. Norik spent many hours in conversation with Serena and Daeron, advising them on subtle ways the Faceless men might infiltrate. He told them to watch the stables, the kitchens, the laundry. A prostitute or a lowly stable boy might be the perfect cover. He also helped Serena identify potential infiltration routes, hidden passages in the Red Keep used by Targaryen monarchs since Maegor's time. Serena marveled at how thoroughly Norik seemed to understand infiltration. She sensed in him a deep regret, as though each secret he revealed was a further betrayal of something he once held sacred. But each revelation might save the king's life. Despite these precautions, the Faceless men struck again, this time outside the city. Word came that Lord Rosby, a wealthy noble fiercely loyal to the crown, had been found dead in his own carriage en route to King's Landing. His guards swore no one had approached the carriage, yet he was discovered with a dagger in his chest and an iron coin resting atop his folded hands. The guards, though thoroughly questioned, appeared genuinely baffled. There was no sign of forced entry, no broken window, nothing. One moment Lord Rosby had been speaking through the carriage window. The next he was slumped over in silence. The entire retinue was thrown into confusion and fear. This murder shook the capital anew. If the assassins could kill so easily and vanish without a trace, was any man safe? Lord Celtigar raged that this was proof enough the war had come. Daeron, grim-faced, ordered that any carriage or litter traveling to the capital be subjected to random searches, though this provided little reassurance. Serena felt a chill seep into her bones. She had known these killers were formidable, but to see it happen so close to the city walls was unnerving. Each new death risked unraveling the realm's fragile unity. One night, about a fortnight after Serena's return, she was awakened by Talus pounding on her door. Dawn had not yet broken, and a thin sliver of moonlight cut through the narrow window. "What is it?" she barked, reaching for her dagger. He stepped in, face ashen. "Norik is gone." "Gone? Did he leave a note?" Serena demanded, her heart pounding. "No note. His chamber was undisturbed. His bed slept in, but he's vanished. The guards at the hall say they saw no one leave. We've searched half the keep already." Serena cursed under her breath, quickly dressing. Her leg still pained her, but she forced it to obey. She limped down corridors of cold stone, Talus at her side. In Norik's chamber, there was indeed no sign of struggle. Serena examined the lock on the window. It was undone, a faint breeze stirring the curtains. She peered out into the courtyard below. A sheer drop. Yet for a skilled assassin, a rope or a cunning device might make such a descent possible. Lord Celtigar arrived, demanding answers, his expression thunderous. Ser Balduin Graves looked concerned. Could he have been taken? Or did he flee? Serena thought of Norik's haunted eyes, the weight of guilt he carried. He might have fled, she said softly, fearful that the Faceless men would kill him for betraying them. Or perhaps they lured him away. If he's truly gone, our best source of intelligence is lost, Lord Celtigar muttered. Serena's voice stiffened. We can't give up on him yet. He may have a reason. I'll have my people search every corner of King's Landing. If he's taken, we'll find him. If he fled, we might still track him. Ser Balduin nodded. And if he turned on us? Then we'll root him out, Serena said, though she could not believe that, not fully. The search yielded no immediate results. Guards scoured taverns and docks. Serena's spies prowled the underbelly of the city, paying urchins for rumors. None had seen a man matching Norik's description. It was as though he had melted into shadow. Days turned into a week. The tension in the Red Keep grew taut. King Daeron felt betrayed, and Lord Celtigar warned that any alliances with former assassins were folly. Serena, for her part, worried that Norik might have fallen into a faceless man trap, that even now he was being tortured or coerced into revealing the Red Keep's defenses. Then, at the close of the 8th day since his disappearance, a messenger arrived at Serena's office bearing a note with no seal. The handwriting was neat, the letters formed in a Bravosi style. They wait for you in the dark. The Iron Bank is not alone. Seek the painted hall in the Street of Steel. Midnight on the new moon. N. Serena's heart pounded as she read it. Quickly, she showed it to Daron and Lord Celtigar. They conferred in private. The painted hall on the Street of Steel was a rundown auction house once used by blacksmiths to display their finest swords, now shuttered. Why would Norik direct them there? Was it a trap? Perhaps. But if it was genuine, it might be a chance to learn who else had conspired with the Iron Bank. Let's plan carefully, Serena advised. We'll go in secret. No large retinue to draw attention. Daron insisted on sending Ser Balduin and 2 of his best knights in disguise. They would watch from a distance while Serena and Talus approached the painted hall near midnight. Myrn insisted on joining, reasoning that if negotiation was needed, a calm voice might help. The night of the new moon was black as pitch, with clouds obscuring even the faint starlight. The Street of Steel, once bustling with the clang of forges, was hushed. Only a few hooded figures moved about. The painted hall loomed at the end of the street, its facade chipped and defaced by graffiti. Serena and Talus approached cautiously, hearts pounding. Myrn lingered back with Ser Balduin, who slipped into a side alley to keep watch. The front door of the painted hall stood ajar, revealing darkness within. Serena pushed it open, stepping into a vast echoing space. The remains of old murals clung to the walls, depicting fanciful knights locked in epic battles. Moonlight from broken skylights gave faint illumination. She saw a single figure standing near a stone plinth in the center of the hall. Hooded, silent, Talus tensed, his hand on his rapier. Serena advanced slowly, mindful of the shadows. Norik. The figure pushed back the hood. It was indeed Norik, though his face looked pale and drawn, sweat beading at his temples. He raised a hand, beckoning them closer. You came. I feared you would not. Why did you vanish? Serena demanded, her voice low but tinged with anger and relief. We feared you betrayed us or were captured. Norik looked away, shame flickering across his features. They threatened a child I once knew in Bravos. They sent me a message promising her death if I did not meet them. I had no choice. They demanded I sabotage the defenses of the Red Keep. I refused, but I had to appear to comply until I could find a way out. I discovered something. There is a consortium of High Lords in Westeros and across the Narrow Sea that has pooled resources with the Iron Bank. Their aim is not merely to kill your king, but to destroy the Targaryen line and place a puppet on the throne. The Faceless men see it as part of their own design, a grand offering to the many-faced god. That consortium meets in secret. I learned that one of its principal backers is Lord Q. Suddenly, a faint sound like a whisper of wind sliced through the darkness. Norik's eyes went wide. He staggered, a small black-feathered arrow protruding from his chest. Talus yelled, sprinting forward. From the gallery overhead, more arrows rained down. Serena threw herself aside behind a toppled bench. Talus grabbed Norik's arm and dragged him out of the line of fire. Norik gasped, blood bubbling at his lips. Serena yelled for Ser Balduin. Within seconds, the disguised knights rushed in from the side entrance, shields raised. A figure dropped from the balcony, a faceless man or woman brandishing a curved blade. Another appeared behind them, stepping out of the shadows with silent menace. Talus lunged to meet the first assassin, rapier clashing against the curved sword. Ser Balduin and the knights formed a shield wall, blocking the second assassin's approach. Myrn crouched beside Norik, trying to stanch the bleeding. The entire hall erupted into chaos. Arrows hissed from the darkness, one striking a knight's shoulder plate. Another embedded in Ser Balduin's shield. With a snarl, Ser Balduin bashed the second assassin with the shield edge, forcing him back. The assassin slipped away with snake-like agility. Talus fought furiously, but the first assassin matched him strike for strike, moving with uncanny grace. Serena appeared from behind the bench, searching for an opening. She spotted a shape shifting in the upper gallery, likely the archer. Summoning her courage, she sprinted across the hall, ignoring the protest in her wounded leg until she found a stairwell leading upward. As she ascended, her dagger in hand, she caught a flicker of movement in the gloom. A slight figure crouched with a small bow, preparing another arrow. Serena launched herself forward, grabbing the figure's arm. A struggle ensued. The assassin hissed like a cornered cat, flipping Serena onto her back. The air rushed out of her lungs. She barely managed to twist aside as a dagger came down where her chest would have been. Fighting through the pain, she rammed her knee into the assassin's ribs, forcing them to recoil. She slashed with her dagger, catching the assassin's forearm. A sharp cry. A heavy blow to her temple nearly knocked her senseless. Through bleary eyes, she saw the assassin raise the dagger again, but at that moment an arrow whistled across the distance, Sarah's arrow, presumably finding its mark in the assassin's neck. Blood spattered and the figure collapsed. Panting, dizzy, Serena grabbed the railing and glanced back into the main hall. Talus was locked in fierce combat, but Ser Balduin and the knights had cornered the second assassin, who was wounded and trying to escape. With a final thrust, Ser Balduin skewered the figure through the chest. The assassin slumped, a look of surprise crossing its face, which then seemed to contort, features shifting slightly in death. Silence fell, broken only by ragged breathing. Serena clutched the railing, trying to steady herself. Then she descended, half-stumbling, to where Norik lay. Myrn was still applying pressure to his chest wound, but the blood was too much. Norik's eyes fluttered. Talus knelt beside him, face twisted in dismay. "Don't speak," Myrn whispered, voice tight with emotion. But Norik grasped Serena's hand, pulling her closer. Blood trickled from his lips. He tried to form words. "Lord Q in the Crownlands." They meet it, his voice faded, breath rattling. A face they wear, unstoppable. "Warn." King, the light in his eyes dimmed. Serena felt his grip slacken. She bowed her head, sorrow warring with fury. Thus died Norik, the one man who might have guided them through this labyrinth of shadows. They had a partial clue, Lord Q. That alone might be the key to uncovering the mysterious consortium. But at what cost? Ser Balduin gently closed Norik's eyes. He was brave, he said, voice tinged with respect. Talus looked ready to weep. Myrn pressed a shaking hand to his forehead in silent prayer. Serena swallowed hard, anger kindling in her chest. The Faceless men had robbed them of a crucial ally, but Norik had given them enough to start pulling the veil from this conspiracy. They could not let his death be in vain. Serena rallied them. "We must depart at once. If there are more assassins nearby, we're not safe here. Ser Balduin, see if you can recover any documents or coins from the bodies. Talus, help me search the upper gallery. Myrn, keep watch. We need to leave no stone unturned before we flee." They did as she asked, though time was short and the painted hall felt laden with watchful shadows. From the bodies, they gathered a few more iron coins, another vial of poison, and curious letters in a cipher none recognized. One letter bore a wax seal depicting a stylized Q, though half melted. Ser Balduin handed it to Serena. "Lord Q." The letter might be from him. She nodded grimly. "I'll have Maester Harold and my best codebreakers attempt to decipher it. This must be the link to the hidden lords who hired the Faceless men." They slipped away from the painted hall under cover of darkness, carrying Norik's body with them, determined to give him a proper funeral. Their hearts were heavy, but a renewed sense of urgency propelled them. Serena vowed she would see this through. The Iron Throne would not fall to these faceless shadows. Back at the Red Keep, the king was devastated by Norik's death. Yet they wasted no time analyzing the partial clues. "Lord Q. Q for Carlton, Quentin, Coheres? There are not many lords with Q in their name," Daron mused. Lord Celtigar frowned. "House Coheres died out centuries ago. Quentin is a Dornish name, but only a few minor lords in Dorne bear it. There's also Lord Carlton Sunglass in the Crownlands. He's old, wealthy, a reputed recluse. Rarely comes to court." Serena pressed. "He may well be a front for a greater alliance. Could we entice him to visit King's Landing?" Daron nodded. "Summon him. He cannot refuse a royal decree. If he is guilty, he might send an assassin in his stead. If he comes in person, we may glean something." And so a royal summons was dispatched. Days stretched to weeks. The War of Shadows persisted. More lords fell to secret murders. House Tarley reported 2 suspicious deaths. The Vale had a near miss. Lady Royce narrowly escaped a would-be assassin thanks to heightened precautions. Fear continued to gnaw at the edges of the realm, but a grudging resilience took hold. Lords and ladies braced themselves, and the Faceless men found not all were easy prey when forewarned. A measure of stalemate settled in. Finally, Lord Carlton Sunglass arrived in the capital with a small retinue. He was indeed old, stoop-shouldered, but still sharp of eye. Over a private supper with the king and his council, he seemed cordial if a bit stiff. Serena watched him carefully, studying every gesture, listening for a slip of the tongue. Midway through the meal, Lord Celtigar casually mentioned the troubles with assassins. Lord Carlton showed polite concern but no signs of alarm. "It is a terrible thing," he said, voice quavering with age. "Such cowardly killers. I keep to my quiet estate where the world's troubles rarely intrude, but I fear that no corner of the realm is safe now." Serena noted how smoothly he dodged the question of alliances. She pressed gently. We've heard rumors that some lords are in league with Bravosi powers. Have you encountered any such rumors, my lord? He smiled blandly. Indeed, but they are only that rumors. I do recall hearing something about the Iron Bank forging clandestine pacts with a few houses. I never gave it much credence. Old men like me prefer simpler times. She caught a faint flicker in his eyes. Perhaps fear, perhaps cunning. Lord Celtigar engaged him further in conversation about finances, trade shipments, the management of estates. Lord Carleton answered without faltering, presenting himself as a humble caretaker of his lands. After supper, he bowed and wished the king well. There was nothing overtly incriminating in his manner. Yet Serena's instincts bristled. The old man was hiding something. That night, she set spies on him, watchers who would track his every movement in the Red Keep. She also arranged for Talus to slip into Carleton's guest chambers, searching for letters or evidence. The next morning, Talus reported that Carleton had an unusual trunk filled with blank parchment and a hidden false bottom. Inside, Talus found an odd charcoal rubbing that looked like a coded map. He had no time to copy it as Carleton stirred. This was enough for Serena. She decided to confront the old lord discreetly, away from the king's ear, to see if he would crack under pressure. She cornered him in a garden courtyard under the pretense of showing him the Red Keep's famed roses. The old man tottered along with a cane, smiling thinly. Such beauty, he murmured. The Targaryens have always had a gift for spectacle. Serena, hands folded, gave a small nod. And you, my lord, have a gift for secrets. He paused, casting her a sharp look. I beg your pardon? I believe you know more about the Faceless men's war on the Iron Throne than you admit, she said quietly, stepping closer. I believe you hold ties to certain conspirators. I advise you not to deny it. Our men have seen the coded documents in your possession. She expected anger or fear. Instead, he let out a rasping sigh, as though tired. I see. So the game is up. Serena frowned. Then you admit your involvement? He turned to her, and for a moment, the old stoop vanished. His voice lost the quaver of age. I am but one small piece of a grand tapestry. But yes, we conspired to remove the Targaryens. We sought the help of the Iron Bank, forging a contract with the House of Black and White. In exchange, we promised them certain trade concessions, ensuring Braavos' supremacy over Westerosi shipping routes. The Targaryens have grown weak, and we believed it was time for a new order. Her blood boiled. How many are you? Which lords stand with you? His lips curved in a rueful smile. More than you can imagine. But you will not extract their names from me. My part in this ends here. In a heartbeat, he whipped his cane in a wide arc. A hidden blade flashed from its tip. Serena barely had time to react, leaning back as the blade whistled past her face, slicing a lock of hair. She stumbled against a rosebush, thorns biting into her hand. Carleton advanced, shockingly agile for one so old. His entire demeanor was changed, no longer feeble but lithe, deadly. She realized with horror that this might not be Carleton at all, but a faceless man wearing his form. She drew her dagger, heart-pounding. The old lord attacked with a flurry of thrusts, each blow aimed with lethal precision. She parried once, twice, but her wounded leg betrayed her. She stumbled, ceding ground. The courtyard was empty save for a pair of distant guards who had not yet noticed the struggle behind the tall hedges. Carleton slashed again, grazing her shoulder. Pain flared, warm blood trickling beneath her garment. Summoning her resolve, Serena feinted left, drawing him into an overextended strike. With a desperate pivot, she thrust her dagger upward into his side. He gasped, faltered, but did not fall. With an abrupt yank, he tore free of her dagger, spinning away. She advanced, ignoring the pain in her leg, determined to finish this. But in the next instant, his face began to ripple, the skin shifting as if wax had been poured over a hidden mold. The visage of an old man sloughed away, revealing a younger man with dark hair, cold eyes. He spat blood, raising the blade again. Before either could strike, footsteps thundered on the courtyard path. Ser Balduin and two guards rushed in, drawn by the sounds of combat. The assassin tensed, realizing the odds had turned. With a furious snarl, he launched himself at the nearest guard, slashing the man's throat. Blood sprayed. Ser Balduin lunged with his sword. The assassin parried, but the knight's strength was too great. A second guard flanked him, and Serena, regaining her balance, moved in from behind, dagger aimed at the assassin's back. Surrounded, outnumbered, the faceless man launched a final, frantic attempt to escape, but Ser Balduin's sword struck a fatal blow across his chest. The assassin staggered, fell to his knees. With a last glare at Serena, he coughed blood and died. It was over. Lord Carleton's sunglass, or whoever he truly was, lay dead. But had the real Carleton been murdered elsewhere, his face stolen? Almost certainly, this entire visit had been a carefully orchestrated infiltration. At the cost of one assassin, the conspirators had gleaned the king's secrets during the private supper. Who knew what crucial intelligence had been gathered? Serena sank to the ground, breathing heavily, pressing a hand to her bleeding shoulder. Ser Balduin knelt beside her. "We must alert the king. Gods be good, the infiltration goes deeper than we feared." She managed a bitter laugh. "It always does." Within the hour, the entire Red Keep was in uproar. The alarm bells rang. Daron was swiftly relocated to a more secure suite. The news spread that Lord Carleton, an assassin wearing his face, had nearly killed the Master of Whisperers. Tension spiked. The King's Council convened in hurried session, each face etched with worry. If a single assassin had managed to pose as a lord and fool them all, who else might be compromised? No one felt entirely safe. Fear simmered in every corridor. That night, while the city reeled, Serena found a moment alone in her chambers. She stared at the city lights through the window, a bandage on her shoulder and bandages on her leg. The pain was constant, a dull throb. Yet a fiercer pain gnawed at her heart, the knowledge that the realm was under siege by an enemy that could be anyone, anywhere. She thought of Norik's last words, unstoppable. "Warn the king." A face they wear. She resolved to see this through, to find and expose every conspirator, to give the king a fighting chance. The Iron Throne might be a seat of swords, but it would not bend so easily to shadows. Days bled into nights. Plots were uncovered. Serena's spies discovered that the conspiracy reached as far as Old Town, as far as Pentos. The Iron Bank was implicated, though it denied all involvement in any illegitimate contracts. A half-burned ledger found in a suspicious warehouse revealed payments from a variety of accounts, some traced to noble houses known for old grudges against the Targaryens. Each new revelation brought more questions. And always, the Faceless men hovered like a silent storm cloud, ready to strike. Yet they had lost momentum. The realm was alerted, lords had grown cautious. What had begun as a silent cull became a war of attrition. King Daron, for his part, steeled himself. He refused to feign his death as Norik had suggested, believing it would cause more chaos than good. Instead, he appeared publicly, reminding his subjects that the Targaryen flame still burned, that he would not be cowed by assassins. This boldness earned him respect among common folk. Hoffet increased the risk to his life. Ser Balduin and the King's Guard never left his side. Serena doubled and tripled her watchers, trusting only a few proven souls to stand guard near the king. Attempts were made on his life, poisons in goblets, suspicious robed figures near his carriage, but each was thwarted in time, often at great cost. In the midst of these frantic efforts, a curious thing happened. Word spread that the House of Black and White itself had suffered internal strife. Some assassins questioned the scope of the war, claiming it overshadowed their original creed, turning them into mere tools of vengeance for mortal lords. A schism formed, with some insisting the many-faced god demanded a grand cleansing, while others believed the order risked corruption by entangling itself in worldly politics on such a massive scale. As a result, the tide of assassins slowed, though it did not cease. Rumors drifted that a renegade sect had broken off, refusing further contracts from the Iron Bank. This fracture within the order gave Westeros a much-needed reprieve. Serena seized the opportunity, instructing her agents to offer gold and safe passage to any Braavosi assassin who might defect. Several took the offer, surrendering valuable intelligence about the conspirators in the realm. In time, with vigilance and cunning, the Crown's agents managed to round up or kill the most dangerous conspirators, exposing their ties to the Iron Bank. The bank, publicly shamed, withdrew its open support for the war, though behind closed doors it likely continued to meddle. The capacity of the Faceless men to operate in Westeros was hobbled by the realm's watchfulness and the internal rift in their order. The war did not end cleanly, assassinations still occurred sporadically, but the dream of toppling the Targaryen line seemed further out of reach. King Daron lived, grown wiser by the ordeal, forging alliances with lords who had proven loyal. He repaid them with royal favor, rebuilding trust wherever suspicion had hollowed it out. Though death still wore many faces, the king's persistence wore them down. The realm did not crumble. Each day that passed without a new high-profile murder was a small victory. Months later, as the threat receded to a murmur, Serena stood on a balcony overlooking the city at sunset. Her wounds had mostly healed. She bore new scars, but also a deeper sense of purpose. The King's War of Shadows, as the small folk called it, had tested her as never before. She had lost friends, allies like Norik, but the realm endured. Lord Celtigar joined her, gazing at the city bathed in orange light. "We are not victorious," he said softly. "We only survive." She inclined her head. Survival can be victory enough in a war against phantoms. He gave a tired smile. Perhaps. The king owes you a great debt. The realm does as well. Serena's gaze followed a flight of crows across the sky. We owe each other. A monarchy does not stand by one woman's hand alone. They fell silent, each lost in thought. Below them, King's Landing thronged with life, battered but unbroken. Though the Faceless men had declared war on the Iron Throne still stood, upheld by determination, alliances, and the will to fight back against the darkness. The war might smolder for years in hidden corners, but the realm had found its footing. The conspirators' grand design had fractured, undone by its own hubris and the refusal of those who defended House Targaryen to yield. In the hush of the fading day, Serena allowed herself a moment of reflection. She thought of Norik and the price he had paid. She thought of Lord Carleton, or the man who wore his face, and the chill of that final combat. She thought of the king, whose spirit did not waver despite the daggers at his back. And she thought of the many innocents who had been spared a blade in the dark because she and her allies had raised the alarm, forging unity where once there was division. Twilight glimmered over the rooftops as torches were lit across the city. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, rival lords, the Iron Bank's machinations, the possibility of more faceless killers. But for now, the realm still belonged to its living. The Targaryen dragon had not been slain. The Iron Throne remained a symbol of power, steeped in the resilience of those who defended it. Even against the faceless shadows of death, they had declared that Westeros would not kneel. So long as a single torch burned against the encroaching night, the realm endured. And, as Serena whispered to herself, so long as there were those willing to fight for it, no shadow, however skilled in the art of death, could truly snuff out the light. Serena did not sleep well in the aftermath of all that had transpired. The Red Keep's halls no longer felt like familiar corridors, but rather the passageways of some vast labyrinth in which every shadow trembled with hidden menace. Each dusk, she made her careful rounds, ensuring that the additional guards posted outside the king's chambers were awake and alert, that the new watchers she had recruited were in place near key entry points. Servants whispered that the realm had won a reprieve, that the king still stood triumphant despite the Faceless men's designs. Yet Serena's nights were plagued by dreams in which faces slid off like melting wax, revealing pitiless eyes beneath. She would awaken in a cold sweat, convinced a dagger hovered near her throat. Even so, she forced herself to get up each morning and keep going. As master of whisperers, she no longer had the luxury of fear. She found herself drawn often to the king's solar, where Daron, ever polite, would listen to the latest intelligence from her network. He was trying, she sensed, to project a calm confidence, but his youthful features seemed etched with deeper lines. Sometimes, while she rattled off the details of new threats, Daron would drift to the window and stare across the city, lost in thoughts he never fully voiced. She suspected he felt guilt that so many good people had already perished in this covert war. Norik, loyal lords, innocents caught in the crossfire of illusions and betrayals. More and more, the king leaned on her counsel. She found it oddly intimate, as if the realm's secrets formed a sort of private language between them. Lord Celtigar remained a staunch ally in these dire times. He had little warmth about him. He was sharp-eyed and sharper-tongued, but behind his calculating manner lay true concern for the king's survival. He was at his busiest these days, coordinating the crown's finances to ensure they would not be strangled by the Iron Bank, whose manipulations had begun to reveal themselves in subtle changes to trade flows. Merchant ships from Bravos were arriving in fewer numbers, and those that did come charged exorbitant rates for goods the capital needed. At council sessions, Celtigar spoke grimly of the bank's hidden hand at every turn. Daron listened gravely, then always turned to Serena for word on the assassins and the hidden conspirators within Westeros. She had gleaned, from the coded letters discovered on the faceless corpse of Lord Carleton, that a cluster of Crownland's nobility had been approached by Bravosi intermediaries. Some had refused to partake in the plot, but enough had accepted that a serious threat brewed within an easy ride's distance of King's Landing. More worrisome, the circle of conspirators included at least one well-placed official within the Red Keep itself, someone with full knowledge of routine guard rotations and the king's schedule. Deciphering the code was slow work, forcing her experts in cryptography to pore over the letters line by line. The few partial passages they had managed to translate pointed toward the name Halved Moon. It might refer to a tavern sign, a street insignia, a hidden sect, or something else entirely. Serena's people combed the city, but no one had heard of a halved moon with any significance. It felt like chasing shadows with only the faintest glimmer of a clue. She lived in a state of relentless watchfulness, her mind continually toggling between threat assessment and the small acts of governance that kept the realm turning. On certain afternoons, she permitted herself a moment's respite in the castle gardens, among the hedges and the water lily pools. Once or twice, King Daron joined her there, strolling among the briar roses in thoughtful silence. He would briefly let his guard down, admitting his exhaustion and frustration at this intangible war. Serena would remind him gently that his resilience alone had kept the realm from dissolving into panic. She sensed a bond that was not quite friendship. He was still her king, but rather a mutual reliance, hammered into being by crisis after crisis. Whenever they parted, it was to return to vigilance. One bright morning, a raven arrived from Riverrun bearing unexpected news. The message came from Lord Tully, who claimed to have captured a man believed to be a Bravosi agent with knowledge of a halved moon. The man had requested safe passage to King's Landing to speak directly to the crown, supposedly offering critical information in exchange for amnesty. Lord Tully, uncertain whether to trust him, had decided to consult the king first. The possibility of learning more about that cryptic phrase ignited immediate interest in the Red Keep. King Daron ordered a carefully worded reply, granting permission for the prisoner to be brought to King's Landing under heavy guard. Several days later, the prisoner arrived in a battered carriage escorted by Tully men-at-arms. He was a slight, sallow-skinned fellow with short-cropped black hair. He introduced himself as Amon Barries, a Bravosi factor who had handled certain commercial dealings on behalf of unnamed clients. The king had the man taken to a secure chamber with Serena and Lord Celtigar in attendance. The Bravosi bowed obsequiously and spoke in a quick, anxious tone. "Your Grace, I swear I mean no harm," Amon said, sweat beading on his brow as he peered around the room. "I was approached in Bravos by men wearing plain clothes but hinting at ties to the Iron Bank. They wanted to funnel gold into Westeros. My job was to find local lords who would serve as conduits for that gold, help them hide the transactions, ensure it was spent for certain ends." Darren's voice was tight. "You mean the ends of assassination and conspiracy?" Amon swallowed. "I fear so, though they did not speak explicitly. But I suspected they were funding efforts to topple the Targaryens. I am no fool. I asked around, learned of the House of Black and White of secret dealings. It terrified me. So I fled to Westeros, but I was caught wandering near Riverrun and Lord Tully detained me. I offered him my knowledge in exchange for my life. He told me you might find some use in me." Serena stepped forward, arms crossed. "We discovered references to something called the Halved Moon among coded letters." "What is it?" A flicker of recognition crossed Amon's features. "Ah, that is the name of a hidden den in Bravos, not a tavern as one might assume, but a meeting place for certain affiliates of the House of Black and White who act outside official channels. But that's not the only usage. They also refer to a location here in King's Landing by that code name, some place that is crucial to the conspiracy. I only know it from passing remarks. The Bravosi conspirators would say, 'We will meet under the halved moon in the city of the Dragon Throne.' I guessed it was a coded reference to a safe house or a secret location for their agents." Serena's mind raced. A safe house in King's Landing known only to the conspirators by this code name. "Do you have any notion of where it might be?" Amon shook his head. "All I know is that it is hidden in plain sight, likely in a district where Bravosi or foreign travelers mingle freely. Perhaps the Street of Silk or the Harbor Wards. I heard mention of a building with a distinctive sign or carving, a moon shape chipped in half. I never saw it myself, only overheard references." Lord Celtigar narrowed his eyes. "What else can you tell us?" Amon hesitated, glancing warily at the king. "If I tell you everything, you might still decide I'm too dangerous to live. I ask only for a guarantee of safe passage." Daron nodded slowly. "Do so, and if your information checks out, we will spare you from the gallows. But if you lie or omit crucial details, the consequences will be dire." With that tentative pact in place, Amon began to divulge more about the money laundering networks, naming minor courtiers who had unwittingly handled sums of gold and detailing the timing of shipments he believed had come from Bravos. But concerning the halved moon in King's Landing, he could not provide any more specifics beyond the rumor that powerful conspirators sometimes met there at night, exchanging documents and coordinating with assassins. The city was large, home to countless buildings, and many displayed some manner of carved signage. Still, it was a lead and perhaps the best one they'd had for weeks. When the interrogation ended, the king instructed Serena to keep Amon under guard in a decent chamber, not a dungeon cell. If he's truly cooperating, let him be comfortable, Daron said. We may glean more from him in time. Meanwhile, we'll search for any sign of this halved moon. Serena tasked Talus, Sarah, and her other trusted operatives with prowling the city at night. She told them to watch for a half-moon emblem on doors, lintels, or hidden in graffiti. They questioned Bravosi sailors at the harbor, claiming it was a new tavern or gambling den rumored to cater to foreigners. No one admitted knowledge. Either it was deeply secret or it went by a different name in public. The Street of Silk, with its swirl of brothels and pleasure houses, offered the largest cluster of businesses that might sport a moon motif, but the watchers reported nothing out of the ordinary. She began to suspect the halved moon might be something intangible, a phrase designating an event or a coded sign, not just a physical marker. As the search dragged on, the realm's paranoia crept upward again. More lords arrived daily, seeking the king's guidance or pleading for additional protection. From the north came quiet, watchful men in cloaks lined with fur, speaking of how even in the far-flung holdings near the wall, rumor had reached them that a wave of faceless shadows threatened the south. From Dorne came a flamboyant retinue insisting that the Targaryens should pay their debts to the Iron Bank swiftly to avert further violence, though many suspected the Dornish had their own intrigues in motion. The Red Keep became a swirling cauldron of politics, secrets, and unspoken terror that any new face could be a faceless man in disguise. During this time, Serena noted that King Daeron seemed to mature at a startling pace. He presided over his council with a steadier hand, no longer betraying his youthful uncertainties. In private, he confessed to her that this intangible war had taught him more about ruling than all his father's lessons combined. He had come to realize that a king must protect his people not just from armies but from the quiet machinations that corrode societies from within. She recognized his growth, and it gave her a rare sense of hope. If he held the realm together through this crisis, perhaps he would usher in a more stable era in the years to come. Yet the nights remained uneasy. The City Watch occasionally discovered a corpse in a dark alley with an iron coin laid upon its chest. Sometimes it was a petty thief or a local gangster not obviously linked to the war on the throne, but the fear that the faceless men were still weaving their web kept everyone on edge. And more alarmingly, there were rumors that another band of assassins had begun operating in the shadows. Rogue sells words or spies from the free cities, seeking to exploit the chaos. King's Landing had become a magnet for every unscrupulous predator in the region. After nearly 3 weeks of fruitless searching, a breakthrough came in the most unexpected manner. An old beggar woman who often loitered outside the Gate of the Gods collapsed one night, and when the City Watch rushed to help her, they found strange sigils tattooed on her forearm. She was delirious, mumbling words that made little sense, but among her incoherent ramblings, she repeated the phrase "moon cut in half" and "the cold room." The watch took her in, unsure of what they had stumbled upon. When word reached Serena, she hurried to question the woman who lay in a small infirmary in the City Watch headquarters, wrapped in tattered blankets. The woman was ancient, her eyes milked by cataracts, her wits slipping in and out of the present. Her accent was thick, half Westerosi, half foreign. Serena crouched by the straw pallet and spoke softly, "Mother, can you hear me?" She took the woman's hand. "You mentioned a halved moon. What did you mean?" The beggar stirred, lips trembling. Her voice came in a low, wavering mumble. "Saw them, I did, slither in the night like eels wearing masks of men. The moon, it was carved above the door. A half-circle, chipstone. They went inside, never came out. Then the door was gone. The door was gone." "Where?" Serena pressed gently. "Where did this happen?" "Street of, oh, we used to call it something else, but the stones are cold, always cold." "By the old cistern." "The cistern with the broken statue. Long ago, oh, so long," her speech dissolved into feverish coughs. Serena's mind spun. The city had numerous cisterns and underground wells, some ancient enough to predate even Maegor's expansions. If a building near a broken cistern had a half-moon carving over the door, that might be the clue they needed. She asked more questions, but the woman's mind began wandering into nonsense about crows and ghosts. She could give no further specifics. Serena arranged for the woman to receive care. Then she returned to the Red Keep to consult with her watchers, old city maps, and Talus's knowledge of King's Landing's lesser-known corners. After hours spent poring over dusty records, an older watchman approached them and mentioned that in the northeastern quarter of the city, near an abandoned shrine, there was indeed an old cistern now sealed off. The statue that once adorned its entrance had partly collapsed. The area was a maze of deserted alleys and half-ruined buildings. No one much went there save for vagrants and those with illicit business. It was well away from the bustling thoroughfares, so a secret safe house there could go unnoticed. The watchman recalled a minor rumor that one of the boarded-up houses in that area had a chipped carving above the door, some shape that might have once been a moon. Serena felt a jolt of excitement. She quickly assembled a small task force of watchers she trusted: Talus, Sarah, Myrn, and 3 others. Under the cover of dusk, they set out in nondescript clothing. She did not want the gold cloaks or the Kingsguard involved yet. Too many eyes, too many leaks. They navigated the labyrinth of cramped alleys in the old quarter. The place was eerily silent except for the distant barking of dogs and the drip of water from broken gutters. The stench of rotting refuse hung in the air. As they went deeper, they found older, abandoned structures, their wooden shutters riddled with holes or missing altogether. Eventually, they came upon a small courtyard near a crumbling stone well. The remains of a statue lay scattered on the ground, a pair of marble legs and a broken torso that might have once depicted some saint. The well itself was sealed with a heavy lid. Nearby stood a building of dark stone, its windows boarded over. Above the door was a half-circle carved into the stone lintel. Indeed, it might once have been a full moon motif, but now it was worn and chipped so that only a semicircle remained. A rotted wooden door barred the entrance. Serena exchanged a tense glance with Talus and Sarah. This had to be it. They approached quietly, stepping over debris. Talus tested the door. Locked or perhaps barricaded from within. He nodded to Sarah, who retrieved slim picking tools from a pouch. She was adept at bypassing locks. Within moments, they heard a soft click. The door creaked open, revealing pitch blackness inside. A dank smell wafted out. They crept forward, torches unlit for the moment, relying on the faint glow of the dying twilight. The air felt stale, tinged with the odor of old charcoal and damp stone. Talus flinched at the scrape of his boots on the floorboards. Serena's pulse hammered in her ears. They advanced into what seemed like an empty foyer. Broken furniture lay scattered, and spider webs clung to the ceiling beams. A corridor opened to the left, another to the right, and a staircase rose to the second floor. Serena signaled for them to split into pairs. She and Talus took the left corridor, while Sarah and Myrn took the right. The others, 2 watchers named Cora and Jens, guarded the main entry. The air grew colder as Serena and Talus moved deeper into the hallway, stepping gingerly to avoid loose planks. At one point, Talus whispered that he saw something glint at the end of the passage. They paused. Carefully, he lit a small lantern, shielding the flame with his palm. In the lantern's glow, they saw a door partly ajar, leading to what looked like a storage room. Inside, a stack of crates, dusty and old, but scuffed footprints on the floor suggested recent traffic. Some crates had been opened, their lids pried off. Cloth wrappings, empty bottles, and scraps of parchment littered the space. Talus bent to inspect them. There were no obvious markings, but the cloth felt expensive, foreign in texture. He rummaged among the debris, then paused, eyes narrowing. "Look at this," he murmured. He held up a scrap of paper bearing a stylized sigil of a coin with a hooded face. It was incomplete, torn across the middle. "It's the Faceless men's iron coin imagery." Serena's mouth went dry. "We're in the right place." Suddenly, from somewhere behind the walls, came a faint metallic clang, like a door slammed shut. Serena and Talus froze, hearts pounding. The noise echoed through the silence. Motioning Talus to douse the lantern, Serena listened with every fiber of her being. Another sound followed, soft footsteps, not near, but somewhere in the house. She beckoned Talus to follow her, and they returned to the corridor, moving toward the faint noise. By now, the light outside had faded almost completely, and the inside of the structure was cast in shifting darkness. They reached the intersection where the staircase loomed, an oppressive shape in the gloom. Carefully, they inched up the stairs, each step threatening to creak. On the landing above, the corridor continued, lit faintly by a single candle sconce near a door at the far end. The flame guttered, casting flickering shadows on the walls. They moved slowly, weapons ready. Then a voice, muffled, drifted through the door. Serena could only make out fragments. Not enough time, tonight, secure the cargo. She felt a surge of adrenaline. More conspirators were likely beyond that door. She and Talus pressed against the wall, inching closer. Talus locked eyes with her, silently asking if they should burst in or try to overhear more. Serena inclined her head, urging caution. They edged near the crack of the door, straining to listen. A second voice replied, "The Bravosi woman expects a final plan, no mistakes, or the contract fails, King's Watchers," then a sudden hush as if the speakers sensed intrusion. Serena barely had time to breathe before the door wrenched open. A figure lunged out, a man in dark leathers, face partially obscured by a scarf, brandishing a short sword. Talus reacted instantly, parrying with his own blade. Sparks flew as steel clashed in the narrow space. Another figure, clad in a hooded cloak, remained just inside the doorway, drawing a crossbow. Serena hurled herself against the door, hoping to knock the crossbow aside. She succeeded in jostling it, but the quarrel fired wildly, splintering the door frame and flying down the hallway. The cloaked figure cursed, stumbling backward. As Talus engaged in a furious exchange with the swordsman, Serena leapt into the room, dagger raised. She glimpsed a cluttered space, a table strewn with maps and documents, an overturned trunk. The crossbow wielder was a lithe figure, possibly female, and she moved with a trained assassin's speed. Instead of reloading, she seized a curved dagger from her belt and slashed at Serena. Metal rang as the blades met. Serena's heart pounded. Her training as Master of Whisperers had taught her to defend herself, but her opponent was clearly skilled. They circled each other, the candlelight flickering on the walls, painting shifting shapes of menace. Behind her, she heard Talus utter a sharp cry. He must have been grazed. But the swords clashed again, so he was still fighting. The hooded woman feinted high, then swept low. Serena barely sidestepped, feeling the whoosh of steel near her leg. She retaliated with a thrust that the woman parried gracefully. Their faces were mere inches apart for a heartbeat, letting Serena see fierce eyes with a slight foreign tilt, her expression as cold as if carved from marble. She realized that this opponent might well be a faceless man or someone affiliated closely with them. In a flash, the woman pivoted, aiming to drive her dagger into Serena's side. Serena blocked with her forearm. Pain bit into her flesh. She grunted, ignoring the sting, and used the momentum to smash the woman's wrist against the edge of a shelf. The dagger fell with a clang. Serena seized the moment to lunge, blade pressed to the woman's throat. The assassin twisted, surprisingly strong, nearly breaking free. But just then, the door crashed open again, and Sarah burst in with her bow drawn, arrow nocked. She took in the scene instantly and aimed the arrow at the assassin's head. "Yield," Sarah hissed. The hooded woman froze, chest heaving. In the corridor, Talus let out a furious grunt, followed by the sound of a sword clattering to the floor. Serena dared a glance. Talus stood over the man in dark leathers, who now lay motionless, blood pooling. Talus's own arm bled from a shallow slash. He looked shaken but victorious. Sarah advanced, arrow still trained on the female conspirator. Serena pinned the assassin against the wall, pressing her dagger firmly at the woman's throat. "Don't move," she ordered, breathing hard. "If you so much as twitch, you'll be dead before your dagger hits the ground." Slowly, the woman raised her hands. Her hood slipped back, revealing short-cropped black hair and a pale face marred by a faint scar along her jaw. She remained silent, eyes darting about as if calculating escape routes. Serena spotted another blade at her hip and reached down to yank it free, tossing it aside. Talus stumbled into the room, wiping sweat from his brow. Outside, in the corridor, footsteps clattered, Myrn and the others, drawn by the commotion. Cora and Jens arrived, swords at the ready. Myrn rushed over to examine Talus's wounds. Sarah kept her arrow trained on the captive. Serena pressed her advantage. "Who are you?" she demanded. "Why meet here? Are you from Bravos?" The woman's lips twisted in defiance. "I serve the many-faced god. My name means nothing." Talus hissed, another faceless man. "Let's see her face shift when she's pinned like this." She stared at them with chilling composure. "You cannot stop what's coming." Sarah's arrow drew back another inch. "Shall we test that?" Serena took a steadying breath, forcing calm into her voice. "You don't need to die here. If you answer our questions, we'll consider mercy. If not, you'll die. Simple as that." A sneer twisted the woman's mouth. "Mercy from you? We know you're kind. You say you serve a king, but all men serve death in the end." Talus stepped closer, pressing the tip of his sword just below her ribs. "You might face him sooner than you think. Talk." The woman's gaze flicked to Talus, then to Serena, then to the arrow pointed at her head. Her breathing quickened, but her resolve did not waver. Serena suspected the faceless men trained their members to withstand the fear of torture or execution, accepting death as part of their creed. Yet the assassin was not quite as placid as one might expect. Something flickered in her eyes. Possibly she was only an associate, not a fully initiated servant of the many-faced god. Or perhaps a part of her still clung to survival. After a moment of taut silence, she spoke in a measured hiss. Our mission was to finalize the final blow, cut the Targaryen line at the root. This place is but one staging ground. Others exist. We exchange messages, coordinate the infiltration. The House of Black and White has decreed that the dragon must be destroyed. Serena forced her voice to stay level. We already know that. We want specifics. Who else meets here? How soon is the next strike? How many of you are left? The woman shook her head, a humorless laugh escaping her lips. You think I'll give you names? The moment I do, my life is forfeit either by your hand or theirs. But if you must know, there was to be a larger gathering here in a fortnight. We plan to finalize the infiltration of your Red Keep. If you found this place sooner, well, it seems we were not careful enough. Serena's thoughts raced. A fortnight. That implied they still had time to set a trap. But how many assassins might converge? Would they risk meeting now that the safe house was compromised? Still, maybe they could glean more. And the conspirators within the Crownlands. Their leadership. The assassin's eyes gleamed with scorn. You imagine that I can speak for all of them? We are not an army, we are an idea. Death can be worn by any who offer themselves to the many-faced god. And many have in secrecy. Can you watch every face in King's Landing? She spat blood onto the floor. There is no victory for you, only delay. Anger flared in Talus's face. He pressed his sword against her flesh, drawing a thin line of blood. That's enough riddles. Give us something real. A tight smile ghosted her lips. You fight well, but you are children against the tide. We have always been in your city, in your halls, at your table. We are the beggars in the street, the lords who kneel for your king, the servants who bring your meals. You can't kill an enemy who is everyone. Serena felt a chill despite her mounting frustration. She believed much of what the woman said. Their foe was as intangible as the wind. Still, she refused to be cowed. I don't need to kill everyone, she said. Only enough to break your chain of command. Are you high enough to be worth interrogating, or do we simply dispose of you? That question seemed to rattle the woman. She glanced at the door, the window, any possible escape route. Her breath quickened. Do with me as you will. My life was forfeit the day I swore my oath. Killing me only sends me to the many-faced god that I have served. Sarah's jaw tightened. We could keep you prisoner, burn this place, and see how your god protects you then. The assassin let out a contemptuous hiss. The House of Black and White would not let you. They will come for me and for you all in due time. Serena suppressed a shiver. Time was slipping away and they had captured only one operative in a cell of many. She made a snap decision. Bind her. We'll take her to the Red Keep. Perhaps the king's presence will loosen her tongue, or perhaps a meeting with our maesters who have certain potions. We'll see what she's willing to disclose then. Talus and Sarah quickly bound the assassin's hands behind her back and gagged her, ignoring her biting attempts to resist. They gave the house a quick search, rummaging through the trunk and rummaging the table's contents. They found a half-burned piece of parchment detailing guard shifts for the Red Keep and a partial map that appeared to show the castle's service tunnels. These had been gleaned from some insider source. Serena's suspicions grew that a traitor in the keep was feeding them operational details. She recognized certain codes that matched the cryptic messages from the other stolen documents. It all pointed to a well-organized infiltration plan. Once they were certain the building held no more conspirators, though Myrn found footprints suggesting someone else had fled during the fight, they decided to torch the place. Leaving it intact might allow the conspirators to return. Talus and Cora scattered lamp oil in every corner. Flames soon crackled up the old timbers. The group fled into the night, the captive assassin in tow. Behind them, the old building's windows flickered with orange light. Smoke curled into the sky, an ominous beacon in the darkness. Serena felt a conflicted satisfaction. They had at least dealt a blow, found a nest of vipers, taken a prisoner. Yet the threat of others returning remained. She resolved to intensify her efforts to unearth every cell in the city. At the Red Keep, their captive was placed in a secure dungeon cell with watchers posted at all hours. Serena reported the operation's success to Daron personally. The king's face hardened at the news of the infiltration map and the planned gathering. They both understood that the conspirators would likely realize the safe house had been raided. They might change their plans, vanish again into the city's labyrinth. The king asked if the prisoner had revealed any names. Serena admitted she had not, at least not yet. She intended to have Maester Harold prepare a truth serum, or at least something that might break the woman's stoic resistance without crossing into outright torture. Daron approved, though he loathed the necessity. That evening, an urgent message arrived from Amon Barries, the Bravosi factor who had been giving them information. He requested an immediate audience with the king. According to the guard, Amon seemed anxious, insisting it pertained to the halved moon and the conspirators. King Daron allowed it, albeit with heavy guard. Amon was brought to the royal solar where Serena, Lord Celtigar, and Ser Balduin Graves were present. The Bravosi man bowed deeply, wringing his hands. "Your Grace, Master of Whisperers," he began, voice trembling. "I have learned something of grave importance. A contact of mine in the city, a fellow factor from Bravos, slipped me a warning. The House of Black and White has begun deploying a new wave of assassins. One's rumored to have undergone even more extreme transformations. They say these killers can mimic not just a face but a person's entire bearing, speech patterns, everything. The rumor calls them the Unbound, a special cadre freed from any constraint of time or cost. Their only goal is to sow chaos until the Targaryen throne falls." Lord Celtigar scoffed, though tension lined his features. "And how would they differ from regular faceless men? Their powers already border on the legendary." Amon grimaced. "I can't be certain, but the whispers suggest the Unbound are fearless zealots, more devout than typical contract killers. Perhaps they are volunteers who lost families and blame the Targaryens. Or perhaps they are debtors the Iron Bank compelled into service. Either way, they apparently do not fear death in the slightest, making them even more dangerous." Daron, standing by the window, turned slowly. "If this is true, how do we prepare?" Amon's eyes flicked nervously from one face to another. "It is said they are unstoppable, that they can even fool those who know the victims well. The only recourse is heightened vigilance, yes, but also some means of verifying identity that the assassins cannot replicate. I remember reading that the Targaryens of old had blood ties to the dragons, a certain magic in their lineage. Perhaps there is some latent magic that can discern friend from foe." Serena and Lord Celtigar exchanged a skeptical glance. The Targaryen bond with dragons was a thing of legend, but few living dragons remained, and Daron himself had no dragon under his command. The king's brow furrowed. "Magic is a precarious notion. We have only fleeting knowledge from the old days. Summoning illusions might do us more harm than good." Still, he seemed unwilling to dismiss the idea outright, given the extremity of the threat. Serena spoke up. "We might also create secret tokens or words that only trusted confidants know. If an assassin kills a lord and takes his face, they still might not know certain private codes or shared memories. We can spread these precautions among the king's inner circle. Though it won't be perfect, it could trip up the Unbound if they move too quickly." The king nodded, seeming relieved to have some strategy. Amon bowed again, looking spent. "I pray that is enough. If I hear more, I will inform you at once. I humbly ask for continued protection, Your Grace." Daron assured him of such, then dismissed him. After Amon departed, the king turned to Serena, concern etched in his eyes. "The threat grows darker by the day. Our foes are as ghosts, and we stand in the torchlight, easy to see, easy to kill." She moved closer, lowering her voice. "Remember that we are not as helpless as they believe. We have watchers in every corner of King's Landing, ravens to every lord. The conspirators have grown bold, but that means they'll be easier to spot if we remain steadfast." He gave her a faint, grateful smile. "Let us hope you're right." In the following days, Serena oversaw the creation of a discreet verification system among the King's Council and key members of the castle staff. They employed a simple cipher key that changed daily, communicated in private to each person by 2 separate messengers to reduce the risk of infiltration. Any staff member or guard who failed to produce the correct phrase or token upon request would face immediate detainment. It was cumbersome, yes, and there were daily confusions and protests, but the added layer of scrutiny seemed necessary. She also began encouraging the High Lord's visiting court to adopt similar caution. The realm's mood grew even more tense, but at least the king's safety was better assured. Meanwhile, the captive assassin languished in her cell. Maester Harold brewed a mild truth serum from rare herbs, a far cry from the monstrous potions rumored in Essos, but potent enough to lower one's mental defenses. Administering it required delicate skill. Too much could kill her, too little would be useless. Serena watched as the woman's eyes glazed over under the flickering torchlight. The damp walls of the dungeon glistened, and a heavy hush cloaked the scene. 2 guards stood behind the prisoner, ensuring she did not attempt anything lethal. Ser Balduin observed from a corner, arms folded, face set like carved granite. At first, the assassin's lips remained firmly shut. She glared at them, her pupils dilated from the potion. Serena questioned her calmly, name, rank, details. The woman spat out only curses. Then Serena shifted tack. She asked about the conspirators' next assembly, pressing gently, repeating the question in a measured tone. Gradually, the woman's eyelids began to flutter. The sedation seeped. Edin, loosening her fierce grip on silence. She muttered something about the painted chamber, confusing Serena as that was a hall within the Red Keep itself. She repeated the phrase, delirious, adding bits about blood on the floor, the first strike, the holy design. It was jumbled nonsense, though it rattled Serena to hear mention of a room so close to the royal quarters. Ser Balduin glanced sharply at Serena. She stepped closer, speaking softly. The painted chamber in the Red Keep? Why? When? The woman's face contorted as if wrestling with invisible chains. Soon. The next feast or the next council, we come. A face you trust. All kneel before the many-faced god. Then she let out a ragged sob and fell silent, sweat beading on her brow. The potion had clearly strained her. Any further dose risked her life. Serena signaled Maester Harold to stop. The assassin slumped, half-conscious. They carried her back to her cell, though she offered no more coherent answers. Serena relayed this alarming hint to Daron and the council. It suggested that an assassin planned to strike in the painted chamber at a major gathering. The painted chamber was often used for ceremonial events or high-level councils. The next large assembly there was scheduled for the formal hearing of a dispute between 2 river lords, an occasion that would bring many lords, knights, and courtiers into the same space. If the conspirators intended to strike at that gathering, the king would be in grave danger along with half his important vassals. Daron considered canceling the event outright, but Lord Celtigar advised that doing so might signal fear and trigger suspicion among the realm. They decided, instead, to proceed with the assembly but with a cunning trap laid. The day of the hearing arrived. The painted chamber, named for its elaborate murals of dragons and Targaryen conquests, was readied with chairs for the lords, a dais for the king. Tension coiled in the air, thick enough to taste. Guards inconspicuously lined the walls, disguised as ushers or minor functionaries. Serena positioned watchers at every entrance, scanning the arriving guests meticulously. Each was asked for the daily cipher phrase. At times, she glimpsed flickers of annoyance or confusion in the eyes of certain lords, but they produced the correct response swiftly enough. No one obvious stood out as an imposter. Serena herself stood by the dais, close to the king, leaning on a cane disguised as a staff to ease the lingering pain in her leg. Ser Balduin and the king's guard were arrayed around Daron, each watchful. Lord Celtigar hovered to the king's right, wearing a dark red cloak that bristled with the tension of a drawn bowstring. The dispute at hand was a trifling matter, a boundary quarrel between House Piper and House Vance. Both lords stood before the king, each making earnest arguments. Daron listened politely. For a moment, it seemed like any normal piece of royal governance. But Serena's instincts prickled. She scanned the faces in the assembly. The watchers at the perimeter exchanged subtle nods, indicating no immediate threat detected. The painted chamber's murals glimmered in the torchlight, while colored rays fell through the stained glass windows. She felt stifling heat building, though the day was mild. Her heart pounded. Something was off, but she couldn't place it. Suddenly, the tall door at the far end opened, admitting a late arrival. A hush fell as the figure stepped in, a man wearing the tabard of House Sunglass, flanked by 2 of the king's gold cloaks. Serena tensed. House Sunglass was the name that had come up before with the fake Lord Carlton. But the man who entered was not old, nor did he appear feeble. He was a younger relation or retainer, perhaps. The gold cloak seemed to have let him pass after verifying his credentials. He approached, bowing deeply. King Daron gave a curt nod, then signaled the hearing to continue. Serena's gaze never left the newcomer. Something about his posture, the fluid way he walked, she had seen it before. Her mind raced, trying to recall. It reminded her of the assassin who had lunged at her in that safe house. Could it be the same killer wearing another face? She glanced at Talus, who stood near the dais, and gave a subtle sign to watch the man. Talus nodded, shifting to keep the suspicious figure in view. The hearing droned on. Lord Piper ranted about grazing rights. Lord Vance retorted. Darren's expression remained patient, but Serena saw a flicker of concern in his eyes as he sensed her tension. Finally, the king spoke, calling for order and announcing he would give his verdict. At that very moment, the suspicious man in sunglass colors moved abruptly, stepping to the side. Talus moved to intercept, but the man suddenly drew a throwing knife from his belt, flicking it at Talus's face. Talus jerked back just in time, the blade slicing past his cheek. Chaos erupted. The gold cloaks flanking the man seized him, but he contorted, freeing himself like an eel. Another hidden blade flashed from his sleeve. Shouts rang out. Lords scrambled from their chairs. The painted chamber's acoustics magnified the uproar into a deafening cacophony. Ser Balduin rushed forward, sword at the ready, while one of the other guards tried to subdue the assassin. The man ducked under the guard's lunge, driving his dagger into the guard's abdomen. Serena limped forward, cane in hand, scanning for any additional threats. The assassin pushed deeper into the chamber, forging a path toward the king. Daron stood on the dais, flanked by two Kingsguard who drew their swords. The intruder hurled another throwing knife, aiming for Daron's chest. One Kingsguard deflected it with a sweeping parry. Sparks flew. The assassin cursed, pivoting to avoid Ser Balduin's slash. In that instant, Talus tackled the man from behind, wrestling him to the ground. They crashed against the dais steps. The assassin twisted, a third hidden blade sliding from under his forearm. He stabbed downward, attempting to carve Talus's throat. Talus caught the wrist, straining with all his might. A jolt of memory coursed through Serena. The prisoner had spoken of an attack in the painted chamber. She realized this might be only the first wave. Quickly, she scanned the crowd for other suspicious figures. Lords were cowering or fleeing, and the watchers tried to maintain order. She noticed a robed scribe near the wall, standing oddly still amid the chaos. Their eyes were locked on the dais, and their posture looked predatory. Serena abandoned her cane and sprinted across the floor, ignoring the pain in her leg. She tackled the scribe just as they pulled a small crossbow from beneath their robes. The bolt fired into the ceiling. A chunk of plaster rained down. Serena hammered her forearm against the scribe's head, dazing them. Guards rushed to help. Indeed, the scribe was another assassin, armed with a stiletto. Serena managed to pin the hand holding the blade. Together with a guard, she disarmed them. Near the dais, Talus still wrestled the initial intruder. Ser Balduin moved in, sword raised. The assassin, pinned on his back, hissed and spat, trying to slice Talus's eyes. Ser Balduin's sword came down in a swift arc, and the assassin's head lolled to the side, blood pooling. Talus rolled off, breathing in ragged gasps. Screams echoed in the chamber, but the immediate threat was contained. The second assassin was knocked unconscious by the guards, crossbow wrenched away. Daron stood tall, shaken but unhurt, his Kingsguard forming a protective ring around him. Panic had seized the onlookers, some lords cowering under tables, others fleeing into the corridor. Serena forced herself to remain calm, shouting for watchers to seal the doors. Ser Balduin quickly took command, verifying that no other assassins lurked among the guests. It took long minutes before the painted chamber quieted into a stunned hush, the stench of blood mingling with the musty air. Two guards lay dead, and Talus's face dripped blood from the near miss of the throwing knife. In the aftermath, Daron thanked the watchers for their swift action and apologized to the assembled lords, many of whom stood trembling or openly furious at the near disaster. The hearing was, of course, postponed indefinitely. The attempt had failed, but it underscored the still potent danger. The assassin's identity remained uncertain, whether he was truly a House Sunglass retainer or just an imposter wearing those colors. The scribe, when searched, was found to have no identifying papers. Another faceless man, or a sellsword, or an unbound zealot. It was impossible to say until interrogation. Serena's mind reeled with the near success of the infiltration. Even with all their precautions, two assassins had managed to get inside the painted chamber. This raised dire questions. Who had vouched for them, who had outfitted them with guard attire or official credentials? The infiltration of the Red Keep was deeper than she'd feared. If not for Talus's quick reflexes, the king could have been slain then and there. In the days that followed, Daron ordered a sweeping purge within the keep. Anyone with questionable loyalties was dismissed or detained for questioning. Some innocents were surely caught up in the dragnet. Serena felt a pang of guilt over the harsh measures, but they had no choice. The realm teetered on the brink. The seized scribe proved even more resistant than the assassin woman in the dungeon, refusing to speak at all. Attempts to drug him met with no success. He seemed somehow immune, or perhaps he had means of resisting the serum. After 3 days, he died abruptly in his cell, likely from a concealed poison. Another dead end. Anger and frustration built among the king's council. Lords demanded swift vengeance against Bravos, urging a blockade or even an attack on the Iron Bank itself. But Daron knew that open war on Bravos would be disastrous for trade and the realm's stability. A preemptive strike on the House of Black and White was equally unthinkable. The city was a fortress on the water, and besides, few men would willingly assault a temple reputed to hold ancient magic. So the king remained caught between calls for retribution and the grim reality that the best he could do was hold the line and ferret out conspirators at home. Weeks passed in this uneasy stalemate. The fortress-like atmosphere in King's Landing grew oppressive. No one walked the corridors without casting suspicious glances. Serena's watchers unmasked a handful of lesser spies, servants caught carrying coded notes, 2 scribes who admitted to funneling guard rosters to an unknown contact. Yet no matter how many they uncovered, new rumors always suggested more infiltration. Through it all, Daron persisted, forging alliances and refusing to show fear. The small folk in the streets took heart from the king's unrelenting presence. Among them, he became known as Daron the Vigilant, a new moniker reflecting how he survived repeated assassination attempts. One evening, Serena retired to her chambers with a splitting headache. She'd spent the day cross-checking records, looking for any sign of who might have forged the past that let the sunglass assassin enter the painted chamber. Everything led to dead ends. She sank into a chair by the small hearth, rubbing her temples, longing for a moment's peace. But soon there was a knock at the door. When she opened it, Talus stood there, still sporting a bandage on his cheek. "Pardon me," he said softly. "I know you're tired, but we found something at last. Something you'll want to see." She ushered him in. "What is it?" He held out a folded scrap of parchment. "One of our watchers in Flea Bottom found this in a stolen goods cache. It's another cipher referencing someone called the Ragged Knight. The watchers believe he's a local gang leader who has been meeting with Bravosi men. The note says the Ragged Knight is to assist the Unbound in an upcoming plan to unseat the dragon from his roost. And it mentions a date 2 weeks hence. No location, though." Serena felt her heart leap. 2 weeks. That lines up with the next major feast the king plans to host. He invited the lords paramount to reaffirm alliances. Could the conspirators plan to strike then, with the Ragged Knight's help? Talus nodded gravely. "That's my guess. If the Ragged Knight is indeed some cutthroat with local clout, he could mobilize criminals to cause distractions around the city, letting the assassins slip into the keep more easily." She swore under her breath. "Then we need to find him first. If we can capture or turn him, we might foil the next attempt. I'll dispatch watchers to Flea Bottom at once." Talus raised a hand, half smiling despite the tension. "I was hoping you'd say that because the watchers already have a lead. The Ragged Knight is rumored to operate out of an abandoned wine warehouse on the outskirts of Flea Bottom near the Blackwater. They plan to raid it tonight. They wanted your final go-ahead." Serena stood, wincing as the motion tugged at her healing leg wound. "Let's not wait. The longer we sit, the more time the conspirators have to vanish. We go tonight." They wasted no time. Under cover of darkness, Serena led a squad of watchers, including Talus, Sarah, and half a dozen gold cloaks she trusted. They donned plain clothes and set out for Flea Bottom. The cramped, twisting alleys of that district teemed with desperate souls even at night, children picking through refuse, furtive figures swapping stolen trinkets. Fires glimmered in rusted braziers, illuminating haggard faces. It was a place where the king's law held only a tenuous grip. Following the watchers' directions, they found a large, dilapidated warehouse fronting a narrow canal. Once it might have been a thriving storehouse for wine shipments, but now its walls were caked in grime and the wooden shutters were riddled with holes. A faint lantern glow showed through one gap. The watchers spread out, some circling to cover the rear exits, while Serena, Talus, and Sarah approached the main door. They had learned from past experience that a swift, coordinated entry was best. On Serena's signal, Talus and Sarah forced the door open with a heave. It splintered inward, sending echoes through the cavernous space. Inside, crates were stacked haphazardly and the floor was strewn with broken casks. A handful of thugs looked up in alarm, hands flying to daggers or clubs. One wore a battered helm and mismatched armor, presumably the Ragged Knight. He bellowed an oath and lunged for a sword propped against a crate. The watchers poured in behind Serena, weapons drawn. A brief, frantic melee erupted. Talus parried a thug's dagger thrust, then countered, disarming him. Sarah fired an arrow at a man trying to climb a ladder to a balcony, catching him in the shoulder. Another thug rushed at Serena, but she swung her cane like a staff, cracking him across the jaw. He crumpled. The Ragged Knight proved a more formidable fighter. Despite his ragged attire, he handled the sword with a measure of skill. 2 watchers tried to subdue him, only to be driven back by powerful slashes. He barked curses, eyes wild. But when Talus joined the fray, the advantage swung. They cornered him against a stack of crates. Desperate, he launched a flurry of blows at Talus, who parried skillfully, letting the momentum carry him out of position. Then Sarah appeared behind him, the tip of her sword pressed to his neck. He froze, panting. "Drop the blade," Serena commanded. "We just want to talk." The battered helm turned her way. Slowly, he let the sword clatter to the floor. 2 watchers seized his arms. The rest of his men were either captured or lying groaning on the ground. The entire raid had lasted barely a minute. Serena moved closer, lifting the visor on his dented helm. Underneath, he was younger than she'd expected, maybe 30, with scars crossing his cheeks. His eyes burned with hatred. "You have no right," he spat. "I'm no traitor to the king, I just do business in the shadows." She studied his defiance. "The note says otherwise. The note that ties you to Bravosi conspirators who mean to kill the king. Care to explain?" He sneered. "I owe no allegiance to Bravos. They pay me to cause trouble is all. I don't much care who sits the Iron Throne. So long as I get my coin, I'll start a riot or two. Maybe help a few masked killers slip in unnoticed." He laughed bitterly. "But it seems I've been caught first." Talus pressed the point of his sword against the man's chest. "Then you admit it. You plan to help the unbound assassins?" The ragged knight shrugged against the watcher's grip. "It was all hush-hush, but yes, I gather that was the end goal. I'm no fool. They said, create a big diversion in Flea Bottom the night of the feast, keep the city watch busy, maybe sabotage the king's supplies." Sounded easy enough. He bared yellowed teeth in a grin. "Easy coin, though I suspect they'd have tied up my loose ends afterward." Serena suppressed a surge of revulsion. "Who is your contact among them?" He paused, evidently calculating how to spin this to his advantage. "I don't know his real name. Some Bravosi fancy talker, slender, with silver rings on his fingers. He calls himself Shalem. He meets me in a tavern near the Dragon Gate. Pays in silver stags that shine too bright. I was to meet him again in 3 nights for final orders." Serena's mind raced. This was the best lead they'd gotten in weeks. "Then you'll meet him as planned. Only you'll have watchers with you and you'll do precisely as I say. If you comply, we might spare your life. If not," he snarled, struggling in the watcher's grip. "If I betray him, I'm a dead man. If I don't, I'll face the headsman. You put me in a fine spot, milady." She gave him a thin smile. "Choose whichever fate you prefer, but you stand a better chance with us than with the assassins. They won't hesitate to kill you once you've served your purpose." After a moment, he gave a short nod, though his eyes smoldered with resentment. "I'll do it, but you'd best protect me." "Done," Serena said simply. They secured the Ragged Knight's men, hauling them to the Red Keep's dungeons under heavy guard. The Watchers swept the warehouse, confiscating stolen goods, though nothing pointed directly to the conspirators except some scraps of Bravosi currency. It was enough to confirm the man's admission. The plan to sabotage the king's feast now seemed urgent. The next step was to set the trap with the Ragged Knights meeting. If they could capture Shalem, a direct link to the Unbound, they might gain the upper hand. They told Daron everything before dawn. The king approved the plan, albeit with a note of caution. This was a dangerous gamble relying on a cutthroat's shaky loyalty. Ser Balduin insisted on personally overseeing the watchers who would secure the tavern. Preparations were made in secret. Talus scouted the tavern location, a dingy establishment called the Mottled Hound, near the Dragon Gate. The interior was cramped, with a single main room and a back storage area. A perfect place for clandestine dealings. Over the next 3 days, watchers set up in surrounding buildings, disguised as beggars or street vendors. The Ragged Knight was allowed out under close supervision, given a short sword to make the ruse believable. He was thoroughly warned that any attempt to flee would end badly. On the appointed night, the Ragged Knight arrived at the Mottled Hound, Talus, and 2 watchers trailing at a distance. Serena, perched in a loft across the street, observed through a narrow window slit. He could see the tavern's dim interior in glimpses, a few rough patrons hunched over mugs, a scrawny serving girl wiping tables. The Ragged Knight took a seat in a corner near a flickering lamp. Serena tensed. Would Shalem appear? Long minutes passed. The tavern's door swung open occasionally, admitting a shadowy figure who might just be another local drunk. Then, after nearly half an hour, a slender man in a hooded cloak entered. Even from across the street, Serena caught the glint of silver rings on his fingers when he pushed back his hood. He moved with a graceful air, scanning the patrons. The Ragged Knight lifted a hand in greeting. Shalem approached warily, seating himself across from the knight. Their conversation commenced in low tones, face to face across the battered table. From her vantage, Serena could see Shalem's angular features, the set of his mouth as he spoke. He seemed relaxed but watchful, placing his hands on the table where the ragged knight could see them. The knight gestured emphatically, likely describing some part of the plan. A few times Shalem nodded, fingertips drumming. Serena's watchers had to be patient. They needed enough of the conversation to glean real evidence. Suddenly, Shalem's posture stiffened. He glanced around as if sensing something amiss. The ragged knight tried to reassure him with a dismissive wave, but Shalem rose abruptly, tossing a few coins on the table. The knight stood as well, making a placating gesture. Serena recognized that the meeting was about to end prematurely. She gave the signal to Talus across the street. The watchers poured into the tavern, intending to surround Shalem. The slender Bravosi saw them and reacted instantly, spinning toward the door. One watcher rushed in from outside, sword drawn. Shalem danced back, deftly sliding a stiletto from his cloak and raking it across the watcher's forearm. Blood splattered. Another watcher lunged from the side. Shalem caught him with a sweeping slash that cut a deep line across his cheek. This assassin was fast, faster than most men Serena had seen. Talus barreled forward, rapier thrusting. Shalem parried with the stiletto, the short blade expertly meeting Talus's longer weapon. They clashed in the tavern's smoky gloom, patrons shrieking and diving for cover under tables. The ragged knight stood off to one side, apparently stunned by the sudden violence. Serena cursed under her breath. The watchers had to move in carefully or Shalem would slip away. She rushed down from the loft, crossing the street with Sarah close behind. By the time they entered the tavern, Talus and Shalem were locked in a ferocious duel amidst toppled chairs. Shalem sidestepped a heavy strike from another watcher, pivoting with lethal grace. Serena shouted, "Surround him. Don't let him near the door." But Shalem, sensing entrapment, hurled a small glass vial at the floor. It shattered, releasing a cloud of acrid smoke. Talus recoiled, coughing. The watcher staggered, eyes stinging. Shalem seized the moment to dash toward the rear storage area. Serena covered her mouth, blinking tears from her eyes, and chased after him with Sarah. The storage area was cramped, lined with barrels. A single door led outside. Shalem yanked it open, stepping into the night. Sarah fired an arrow, which grazed his cloak as he moved. He hissed in pain or anger, then vanished into the darkness. They spilled out into a narrow alley. By the light of a dim moon, they saw Shalem sprinting away, limping slightly. Serena and Sarah bolted after him, calling for the watchers to fan out. The assassin darted around a corner, bounding over crates like a cat. Serena's legs still troubled her, but she forced herself to keep pace. She saw fleeting glimpses of Shalem's silhouette. She shouted for him to stop, though she knew he would not. Another arrow from Sarah whistled through the air, striking the alley wall near Shalem's head. He flinched, stumbling. They rounded another corner and found themselves in a dead-end courtyard. High walls of adjoining buildings enclosed the space, with a single locked gate at the far side. Shalem skidded to a halt, scanning for an escape route. Serena and Sarah blocked the entrance, weapons raised. The assassin bared his teeth in a wolfish grin. He pressed a hand to a wound on his side, blood seeping between his fingers. "You are persistent," he rasped in a thick Bravosi accent. Serena had no breath for banter. "You're trapped. Drop the blade." He snorted, brandishing the stiletto. "I've escaped worse than this." Sarah notched another arrow, drawing the string. "Not tonight." Shalem's eyes flicked to the rooftops, then to the locked gate. Another wry grin. Before either woman could react, he threw another vial at their feet. Again, a burst of smoke enveloped the alley. Serena coughed, her eyes watering. When the smoke cleared, Shalem was scaling a wall, fingers searching for any crack to pull himself up. Sarah loosed an arrow, but the shot missed, clattering off stone. Shalem reached the top, teetering on the edge. A watcher emerged from the adjacent street, sword drawn, but he was too late. Shalem vaulted over the wall, disappearing into the darkness beyond. Frustration clenched Serena's stomach like a vice. They had cornered him, only to let him slip away. She cursed quietly. The watchers scrambled around the perimeter, seeking any sign of the fugitive. Talus arrived, out of breath, leaning against a wall. "Gone." Serena nodded grimly. "He's wounded." That gives us something. We can search for a bleeding man or a known contact. But for now, yes, he's gone. The ragged knight, when they returned to the tavern, was still there, guarded by 2 watchers. He glared at them sullenly, cursing their failure. They escorted him back to the Red Keep, uncertain if they could glean anything further from him. He claimed ignorance of Shalem's hideouts or associates. Talus suspected the man was holding back out of fear or cunning, but either way, the immediate lead had dried up. Now the king's feast loomed ever closer, and the conspirators still lurked at the edges of sight. Serena's nights grew sleepless, overshadowed by dread that the unbound would strike. She marshaled every resource, every loyal agent, to guard the keep. She had the entrances triple guarded, the wells and kitchens tested for poison. Secret passageways were sealed off, yet she felt as though she was trying to ward off a flood with flimsy sandbags. At last, the day of the feast arrived. Lord Celtigar had arranged a grand banquet to celebrate new alliances with certain Westerosi houses who had proven their loyalty throughout the crisis. Musicians tuned their instruments in the great hall, cooks roasted succulent meats in the kitchens, servants bustled about. The king intended it as a show of strength. Despite repeated attempts on his life, he would not cower. He wore regal black and crimson, Targaryen colors shining in the candlelight. Yet behind every tapestry, watchers lurked. Even the minstrels had been vetted, each forced to perform earlier in private to confirm their identity. The entire keep bristled with tension beneath the veneer of celebration. Serena stood near the dais with Lord Celtigar, scanning the arriving guests. The great lords from the Reach, the Stormlands, the Vale, each entered in turn. Familiar faces approached to bow, exchanging pleasantries that felt hollow. Serena returned each greeting with polite smiles, but her thoughts were on the potential infiltration. Then she spotted a figure across the hall, a woman in a blue gown, the wife of a Crownlands lord. Something about her posture made Serena uneasy. She watched as the woman chatted with others, her smile painted on. Was it merely nerves or something more sinister? "Stay watchful," she murmured to Lord Celtigar, stepping away. He gave a curt nod. Serena circled the hall, passing by the feast tables laden with fruit and wine. She trailed the woman in the blue gown, studying her gestures. The woman accepted a goblet of wine from a servant, sipped, and made idle chatter with a minor lord. Nothing suspicious. Serena exhaled, moving on to check another cluster of guests. She knew the real threat might come from anywhere, not necessarily a suspicious posture or a stranger's face. That was the terror of the Faceless men. As the feast progressed, laughter and music filled the hall, though an undercurrent of anxiety persisted. King Daeron rose to address the assembly, praising their unity. Serena drifted near the walls, keeping a keen eye on the perimeter. Talus was posted by one entrance, Sarah by another. Myrn circulated among the guests, listening for any rumors of sabotage. Every so often, Serena glanced at the king's high table, ensuring he remained safe. Partway through Darren's speech, a slight commotion arose near the side of the hall. A servant collapsed, clutching her throat. Guests gasped. The music faltered. Serena hurried over, pushing through the crowd. The young serving girl lay on the rushes, her skin turning blue, foam on her lips. Poison. Immediately, suspicion flared that it was intended for a lord or the king. But had she accidentally ingested it, or had someone used it to create a diversion? Serena barked orders to keep everyone back. A maester rushed forward to check the girl, but she was beyond help. Serena scanned the crowd around the fallen servant, searching for a glimpse of triumph or guilt. At that moment, a flash of silver caught her eye. Across the hall, near the dais, a figure in a dark cloak slipped behind a drapery. Was that another servant, or someone disguised? She dashed after the figure, weaving through startled guests. The drapery concealed a small alcove leading to a side corridor. She arrived just in time to see the figure vanish around the corner. Her heart hammered. This had to be part of the assassination attempt. She followed at a run, ignoring the twinge in her healing leg. The corridor led to a dimly lit hallway, seldom used. She caught a brief glimpse of the figure ahead. They turned a corner. She pursued, adrenaline surging. At the next bend, she nearly stumbled over the body of a guard lying on the floor, eyes open in a blank stare, throat cut. Blood pooled. The corridor beyond was empty. She pressed on, refusing to let the killer slip away. At last, she heard footsteps on the stone steps leading upward, a narrow spiral staircase that wound to the ramparts. She climbed, each step echoing in her ears. The top opened onto a windy walkway along the outer wall of the Red Keep. Moonlight fell in patches across the battlements. The figure was just ahead. Serena saw them pause near the crenellations as if searching for an escape route. They turned back toward her. She froze, meeting their eyes. The face was obscured by a dark mask, but she sensed an eerie composure radiating from them. "Stop," she commanded, voice ragged with exertion. "You're surrounded. Give up." No response. The figure took a step backward as though weighing the option of leaping off the wall. Then, with startling speed, they lunged forward, a gleaming dagger in hand. Serena barely managed to parry with her cane. The blow jarred her arm. Wind whipped across the ramparts as they engaged in a desperate clash of steel. The assassin moved with lethal grace. Serena fought defensively, deflecting slash after slash. A savage thrust nearly found her stomach, but she twisted aside, feeling the blade slice through the fabric of her doublet. She recognized the fluid, unstoppable skill of a faceless man, likely one of the unbound. Each strike came without hesitation or fear. She realized that if she did not end this quickly, she would be the one to die. Summoning her resolve, she ducked under a horizontal slash and jammed her cane into the assassin's ribs. They staggered momentarily, letting her slash at their arm with her dagger. It connected, drawing blood. The assassin hissed but did not slow. Their next thrust aimed for her throat. She barely dodged, feeling the blade nick her cheek. They spun, hooking a foot around her calf, and yanked, sending Serena sprawling onto the cold stone. Pain flared in her wounded leg. The assassin stood over her, dagger raised. She braced for the final blow, but an arrow whistled from the shadows, striking the assassin's shoulder. Sarah, breathless, emerged from the spiral stairs. The assassin gasped, dropping to a knee. Serena used the moment to roll aside, scramble upright, and lunge with her dagger. She drove it into the assassin's flank, pushing with all her strength. The assassin let out a choking sound, knees buckling. Serena gritted her teeth, twisted the blade, and pulled it free. The assassin collapsed, blood seeping across the rampart stones. Sarah rushed over, bow in hand, eyes wide. Serena knelt, panting. She yanked the mask from the dying assassin's face. It was a man of unremarkable features, but she could see the blank resolve in his eyes, even in his final moments. No fear, no regret, only a fanatic's emptiness. Then the light in his gaze dimmed and his body went limp. Sarah offered Serena a hand. "Gods, are you all right?" Serena's limbs trembled. "I'll live." She touched her cheek, finding blood. He was unstoppable. "Not quite," Sarah murmured, relief in her eyes. They stood, leaning against the battlements, wind whipping their hair. Below them, the torchlit city stretched out. The assassin's dagger lay on the stone, a slender, vicious weapon. Serena felt a surge of mingled triumph and horror. Another unbound, or so it seemed, had died in the attempt to kill her, or perhaps to set the stage for killing the king. The cost was more bloodshed on the Red Keep stones. And still, she knew the threat was not over. When they descended to the Great Hall, the feast had descended into tense confusion. The serving girl had died of poison, the cause unknown. King Daron, visibly shaken, ended the feast early, sending guests to their quarters with an apology. Ser Balduin reorganized the guards, ensuring no one left the castle without thorough checks. As Serena re-entered the hall, limping and bloodied, she drew stares of shock and alarm. Daron rushed to her side. She bowed her head, affirming that she had stopped at least one assassin. He closed his eyes in relief, placing a hand on her shoulder. When the chaos subsided, the king summoned his closest advisors, including Serena, to a private meeting in the council chamber. He looked exhausted yet resolute. "We cannot endure these endless attempts," he said quietly. "They've proven again and again they can strike within our walls. If we continue reacting defensively, the realm will bleed from 1,000 cuts." Lord Celtigar concurred. "But what else can we do? An open attack on Bravos is madness. We cannot negotiate with the House of Black and White." Darren's jaw tightened. "Perhaps not. Yet somewhere, the conspirators have a leadership and inner circle that set this entire war in motion. The Iron Bank, or some sect within it, is the likely culprit. If we cannot attack the House of Black and White, perhaps we can cut off the gold that pays them. If we push them into a corner financially, we might force them to call off the contract for fear of losing the stability that Bravos thrives upon." Serena recognized the glimmer in the king's eyes. He had a plan forming, one that involved stoking the Iron Bank's fear of losing trade and influence. They would need cunning diplomacy, forging alliances with Pentos, Lys, maybe even Mir. If Bravos faced a united front, it might reconsider backing this lethal vendetta. It was a gamble, but a bold one. She nodded slowly. "We can gather lords and merchants, promise them privileged trade deals if they refuse Bravosi credit. We can also encourage the free cities who resent Bravos' dominance to join us. It may not stop the assassins immediately, but it undermines their sponsors." Daron let out a breath. "Yes, we must strike at the root of their power, the gold. Without an endless stream of coin, the conspirators can't hire wave after wave of killers. Let them learn that the realm will not submit. He stood straighter, eyes burning with renewed determination. I will not allow them to tear this kingdom apart from the shadows. Serena felt a surge of admiration for his resolve. The next steps would be tricky, but better to act than to wait for the next knife in the dark. She placed a hand on the hilt of her dagger, fresh blood staining the blade. "We're with you, Your Grace." In the days that followed, missives flew from King's Landing to allied houses and friendly ports. Envoys were dispatched to Pentos and Lys, forging pacts that discouraged them from dealing with Braavosi bankers. House Valerion lent its ships to guard shipping lanes near Dragonstone, warning Braavosi vessels that trade would not be so free anymore. Merchants in King's Landing who had once revered Braavos' superior lending terms now found new incentives to bank with local moneylenders. House Tyrell, eager to preserve stable markets for the Reach's harvest, lent support to Darren's plan. Gradually, a quiet but potent economic front formed against the Iron Bank. The effect was subtle at first, delays in Braavosi shipments, rising interest rates for their loans, but it signaled that the realm would not be an easy target. All the while, the assassinations did not cease entirely, but they grew less frequent. The conspirators, seeing the realm unify, seemed forced to pick their targets more carefully. Serena's watchers still uncovered plots here and there, but the swirling tide of terror began to recede. For every infiltration attempt uncovered, fewer new assassins seemed to arrive. Word trickled in that internal strife within the House of Black and White had worsened. Some blamed the leadership for overextending the order in a costly war with uncertain gains. Rumor had it that the Iron Bank and the House of Black and White were at odds over how to proceed. Finally, as the realm's newly forged alliances strengthened, King Daron announced a formal decree. Westeros would no longer pay debts to the Iron Bank while the contract on the Targaryen line persisted. If they break faith with us, he declared, we shall break the flow of gold that they so cherish. This triggered outrage in Braavos, but it also caused panic among the Braavosi merchant class, who depended heavily on Westeros as a trading partner. Tales of near revolts in Braavos reached King's Landing. The Sea Lord faced pressure from merchant guilds to restore normal relations. Under these conditions, the Iron Bank found itself forced to negotiate or risk major financial loss. A hush fell over the War of Shadows. The flow of assassins slowed to a trickle. It did not end overnight. Isolated killings still occurred. Some zealots among the Faceless men refused to abandon their crusade. But the broad front that sought to topple the Iron Throne fractured without unlimited gold to back it. Serena's spies reported that even some of the Unbound retreated or turned renegade, disillusioned with a cause that no longer seemed unstoppable. Meanwhile, the king's careful diplomacy bore fruit. The realm stabilized as lords realized the Targaryens were not about to topple. With the tension receding, King Daron oversaw cautious reforms, ensuring future infiltration would be more difficult. In the end, the war declared by the Faceless men did not end in a decisive battle, but rather in a slow suffocation of the conspirators' resources and a resolute stand by the king and his allies. Death still lurked in corners, but it no longer prowled the streets so brazenly. The House of Black and White, wounded by internal discord and external pressure, withdrew the bulk of its forces. And so King's Landing found itself, at last, breathing easier. A year after the Painted Chamber incident, Serena stood on a balcony of the Red Keep, watching the sun set over the Blackwater Rush. The city hummed with life below, not free from trouble, but no longer living under the constant dread of a faceless knife. The King's Court had stabilized. Trade with most of the free cities continued apace, though relations with Braavos were uneasy. Daron had proven that subtle strategy could outmaneuver even the deadliest assassins, so long as the realm stood united behind him. Serena's thoughts drifted to all those lost along the way, Norik, who had paid the ultimate price to help them. Guards, servants, even unsuspecting lords cut down in the silent war. She recalled the unstoppable gaze of the unbound assassin she'd killed on the ramparts. The cost had been high, yet the Iron Throne endured. The king had emerged stronger, and so had she. She touched the scar on her cheek, a reminder of how close the blade had come. Behind her, she heard footsteps. She turned to see King Daron approaching, clad in a simple black tunic, no crown on his head. She bowed out of habit, and he chuckled, shaking his head. "We are past such formalities, Serena." She straightened, smiling faintly. "Old habits die hard, Your Grace." He came to stand beside her, gazing over the city. The golden light bathed his silver-gold hair, and for a moment she saw not a weary ruler but a young man who had weathered a trial by fire. "The city recovers," he murmured. "The wounds might linger, but at least we have peace." Piece of a sort, she agreed quietly. It's never truly certain, but we've shown we can stand against even the faceless men. That is no small feat. He nodded, a gentle breeze stirring his hair. You never wavered even when hope seemed lost. The realm owes you a great debt. She looked away, slightly embarrassed. I only did what needed doing. Nevertheless, he said, no one else could have managed the shadows as you did. And though I've grown used to wearing a king's mantle, I still sleep easier knowing you watch the night, so to speak. His gratitude warmed her. She placed a hand on the balcony's railing, gazing at the vibrant sky. As long as the king sits the Iron Throne, I'll be here if you want me. We cannot take victory for granted. There are always those who lurk in the dark. Daron exhaled. True. But for tonight, at least, let us allow ourselves a moment's solace. He glanced at her sidelong, a small smile on his lips. We have earned that much. Serena's heart felt lighter. Together, they watched the sun slip below the horizon, a golden glow fading into twilight. The war declared by the faceless men had nearly consumed them, but they had survived. The conspirators had been scattered, the Iron Bank thwarted. For all the blood and shadows, the realm still stood under Targaryen rule. And so she allowed herself a rare, quiet satisfaction thinking of the alliances formed, the cunning plans laid, the loyal watchers who had risked their lives time and again. Perhaps in this fragile peace, they could begin to heal. When night fell over King's Landing, the torches gleamed along the walls, illuminating a city that no longer trembled at every corner. The threat of unseen knives might never vanish entirely. Somewhere, a vengeful acolyte of the many-faced god surely sharpened a blade, but for now, the people slept less fearful. In the Red Keep, as the king departed for his chambers and Serena turned to her tasks, she reflected on how fragile victory could be. Yet for the moment, it was victory all the same. In a distant realm, the House of Black and White might brood over its bruised pride, the Iron Bank might plot new maneuvers, but Westeros had proven resilient. The intangible war that had begun with whispered rumors in Bravos ended with the realm's subtle refusal to bow to fear and gold. And at the heart of it all, Serena stood ready, a silent sentinel in the dark, protecting the king who refused to yield. So long as that resolve burned in their hearts, no faceless shadow, however deadly, could truly extinguish the flame of the Iron Throne.